back and forth contest. Ultimately, the Canadiens exacted their revenge on the city of Salt Lake for the auto pedestrian accident, meted out on one of their teammates. Scott Mitchell is going to join me in the noon hour. Gianna Neepkins, Utah women's basketball, coming off a loss, unfortunately, ranked going into the game 22 in the country. We'll see what it plays out like in the rankings moving forward, and they have a big one coming up on Friday night against TCU. So lots to get to on the show today. If you were listening at this time yesterday on the Sean O'Connell Show, you know that we had a special press conference at the University of Utah that Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scally, and the new offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, all sat down and did a state of the program kind of an address. And it was good. I think it was probably necessary. There was that strange silent period you got from the Utah football while it was unclear what Kyle Whittingham's decision was going to be on his own future. It was unclear how Morgan Scally felt about it. And, Jason Beck, of course, was not yet part of the program. Now all these guys in the building, they're figuring it out with the roster. And they've updated the Utah football roster on the official school website. So now that the season of 2024 is fully in the books and behind us, and we have started the first quarter of the offseason, which is effectively school and winter conditioning for these student athletes, they have updated the roster and given us a glimpse at what it's going to be like from a personnel standpoint for Utah football moving into 2025. We'll get into some of that today. We'll probably actually start with some of that. BYU basketball got a win over Oklahoma State last night. Maybe we'll touch on some of that. I keep looking at my television and seeing this TGL, this Tiger Golf League, video game golf on the screen. People seem to love this thing. I don't know if it's just because it's being force-fed and the athletes, the golfers, are like maybe incentivized to look like they're having the most fun that they've ever had in their lives playing this kind of half real, half video game golf. But it seems to be a thing that might be catching on, which is really interesting. Because last week I asked if there was an appetite for an accessory version of the sports that you already love, and most of the answer was no, but this thing seems to be getting a little bit of traction, so we'll see how it plays out. James Peterson producing the show today, by the way, which is always great because normally he's my boss, but for the next 3 hours, as we have decided, I get to be his boss.
Yeah, and the last 2 days with Zach filling in for Alonzo as he's done an admirable job over the last few months. I have been both of your bosses, and now I get that taken away. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, OC. Yeah, I was getting used to the power.
It's good for you.
Oh, that's what it is. You're providing a check to my power, and you're right. That's good for me as a human being.
We don't want you being Vladimir Putin here, all right? We don't want some wild, lawless dictatorship developing in our tiny little studio on Broadway.
Yeah, it's like the Vatican of Salt Lake City, just this tiny little square in the city.
Yes.
That's mine.
Yes. We're a sovereign nation right here, and you are the ruler. I don't like that one bit.
Except for these 3 hours.
Sean
You're the ruler.
That's right. That's right. And I will do so with an iron fist. Sean O'Connell Show today and every day brought to you by Les Schwab Tires. Les Schwab has the tires, the wheels, and the accessories for whatever it is you drive. Stop by the local Les Schwab today. The professionals there will get the job done right the very first time. All right, so I put out some important polls for the day. Probably the most important one. You're not the biggest shoe guy, right, James? You're not like a sneaker collector.
No, I don't collect them. Yeah, I'm never the guy that goes on. What is it? StockX.
StockX.
I'm not the guy who gets the brand new Jordans. I go to the outlets. Air quotes outlets because it's still the same prices as the regular stores, right?
Sometimes,
and I go to the clearance aisle and find my favorite shoe in the clearance aisle. Well, that's how I shop.
You know what's funny is I pretend like I'm a sneakerhead, but I do the same thing, which I think is like a disqualifier.
I think so too.
If you only are willing to buy shoes on sale, 90% of the time, you're probably not actually a sneakerhead. I just have a lot of shoes.
Or I go to Ross, and every once in a while, Ross has some treasures that.
Well, not in size 11 and a half or 12.
That's true. That's a good point. I did find. I think I'm probably mentioned this on the show before. I did find some Carolina blue colorway Air Force Ones in size 11 at Ross one time when I was in high school, like a long time ago.
Yeah, okay. Back in the day, you could find some gems.
Yeah, maybe it's changed way more than I realized because now that I'm thinking of it, I haven't been to Ross looking for gems in a while.
Well, this might not be your number one question to answer then, but I put it out there. The Nike family has a bunch of signature shoes that are good. They've got the Jordans that are, of course, iconic and great. In the NBA basketball family, they've got the LeBron collection, they've got the Kobe's, they've got the KD's. Wembanyama now has his own. I mean, there's a bunch of guys, I'm sure, that I'm not even naming. But I put the poll out there, who's got the best signature shoes besides Jordan, because Jordan would run away with this. LeBron, Kobe, KD, or Book. And the reason I put this up there is because the Devin Booker sneaker collection is quietly dropping some absolute heat. Like, this dude, I'm sure, is completely uninvolved.
No love for the Dons?
Well, it's not Nike.
Oh, it's Nike. Sorry. I thought you were saying players. My bad.
No.
I should pay attention, maybe.
If you open it up to, like, the Adidas realm and the
honestly,
Antas, the Pumas.
It's true.
You know?
I did like, if we opened it up to everybody's, my favorite growing up were the T-Max.
T-Max were cool. Iversons were great.
Yeah, Iversons were good. But, yeah, if we're just talking Nikes, I get it.
Fila had a run where they had some, like, Jerry Stackhouses that were pretty good, you know?
And that's a long time ago for
Fila. I think Patrick Ewing had a Reebok pump for a minute.
Yeah.
Which
Reebok was good for a minute there.
I think Shaq had some Reebok pumps for a second.
And Iversons were Reebok.
Yes.
So Reebok, R.I.P. to Reebok's signature shoe collection, because they were pretty good in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, 90s, early 2000s. They had their moment. Anyway, the Devin Bookers, man, I have deliberately disqualified myself from collecting Jordans because it could get too expensive, all right? So I wear...
It's an expensive collection.
I wear Air Max 90s. I wear Air Force Ones. I like the Nike skateboarding Steven Janoskis. There's just a few that I'm willing to collect, all right? A Dunk highs and lows. I'm willing to buy those and wear those. But I don't branch out that much in the Nike world because then you could just get really, really in trouble. Way too many good options, okay? So I've stayed away from the Jordans. I don't have any LeBrons. I don't have any Kobe's. I don't have any KD's. I am going to make my first purchase of the Devin Booker's. He's got this Forrest Gump version coming out. He's got the Year of the Snake with the snakeskin print. Like, he's got some really great shoes right now. And I don't know if he's involved in the design process like Damian Lillard is with his signature shoe over at Adidas. But if he is, man, Book, congratulations to you, man. You got an eye.
Yeah,
you got style.
I just looked him up. He's got some good shoes.
They're good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I put that out there. People so far are not as responsive to that as the other polls. But the other one I put out there, Kyle Whittingham in the press conference yesterday alluded to it again. I think he was actually asked about it and touched on it again. One of his always on repeat predictions for the college football world. And some of these irk people. Some of these have gotten him in trouble. He's just a reasonable man who paints the picture of what he believes is coming in college sports. And he's been saying this for a while, and he's been saying the thing, that he repeats all the time, that the quarterback is the most important position in college football. It's not even close. In team sports, even he says that. It's not even close. He says that frequently. He says, I think eventually we're going to an NFL model, a two-league, super conference situation. He's alluded to that for a couple years now. People don't like that because they think it means that he's saying the Big 12 is not worthy of Utah's inclusion. People have drawn their own inferences from that. That's not what he's saying. He's just telling you that the landscape now is not what the landscape is going to be. And one of his predictions was about NIL. and we've had a lot of conversations about NIL with Utah football this offseason. The conversation about NIL and, hey, are you going to be able to compete? Look, talking with people in the know at the University of Utah, the most recent feedback I've gotten is, hey, look, we've got money. We have plenty of money. We have money to be competitive. Money is not going to be the thing that keeps Utah out of Big 12 conference championship competition. Will it preclude Utah from being a national championship contender? Probably, because it always has. But will it stop Utah from achieving the level that they were able to achieve in the Pac-12 at least? It doesn't seem like it from the people in the know. But Kyle Whittingham has made this prediction that the top 25 teams in NIL funds are probably going to very closely match or directly match the top 25 teams in actual results and rankings at the end of the year. And he touched on it again yesterday, and I was like, you know what? Coach Witt is usually Wittstradamus with a lot of this stuff. Is he correct on this prediction, at least so far? And it was really interesting, James, because in 2024, I don't think he is correct in 2024. Notre Dame or Ohio State, they're going to be 1-2 in the final rankings, all right? I think even though we don't have an actual true reporting of who's the best when it comes to NIL, who the real NIL top 25 is, it seems reasonable that we can kind of deduce, right? So Ohio State and Notre Dame, can we agree those are two top 25 NIL teams?
Definitely.
I don't think they're number one.
Ohio State is top 3 probably, right?
I don't think they're number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
Directly. I think Oregon is somewhere in there. I think Texas is somewhere in there. I think Georgia is somewhere in there. But
Ohio State may be one, but they could be, but Notre Dame.
They're probably
they're probably Notre Dame's probably top 10.
Yeah, they're probably both in the top 10.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be 1-2. So I don't think it's going to exactly match ever. Right? It's kind of like with pro sports. It's actually very rare for the number 1 payroll in baseball to also be the champion.
It's true.
And the number 2 payroll in baseball to be the runner-up. And the same thing is true in European soccer. It just doesn't go that way. And I bring those up because they're the non-hard salary capped leagues that we can. And there is no salary cap right now, at least in college football. But is competition true to the prediction of, hey, if you have a top 25 NIL fund, you're going to have a top 25 football team? Well, it's very easy for a fan base to say, yeah, that's what we have to get to. That's the only way for us to be successful. Does it matter? Absolutely it does. Is it going to be a direct correlation? Is there a causation relationship here? That's too big of a leap because I'm looking right now, and it's going to be Notre Dame, Ohio State at the top, right? Oregon, Georgia, Texas. Yes. These are all top 25 NIL teams, right? Tennessee, yes. In the final rankings, Indiana is going to be somewhere between 9 and 12, right? Maybe they're all the way down to 15 because people don't like Indiana. Indiana was a factor in the college football playoff conversation all year. There is no way in hell that Indiana has anything close to a top 25 NIL fund. They just don't.
It was great coaching and a lot of a fortunate schedule and a lot of other fortune of people underestimating them because they're Indiana and getting a bunch of wins. Like that was this year. You can't do that every year, but you're able to do that in one year at a time. And Indiana was able to take advantage of that.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do an exercise with the college football playoff ranking top 25 going into the college football playoff, okay? When they were making the seeding, I'm going to say the team. You're going to tell me yes or no. Do we think they have a top 25 NIL fund? Okay. We know they're in the top 25 rankings-wise, results-wise. Do they have a top 25 NIL fund? Okay. I'll repeat myself here. Oregon.
Yes.
Georgia.
Yes.
Texas.
Yes.
Penn State.
Yes.
Notre Dame.
Yes.
Ohio State.
Yes.
Tennessee.
Yes.
Indiana.
I don't know.
I think no.
I think no.
Yeah. They're just are they somewhere in the top 50? Probably because they're Big Ten school. Are they top 25?
Top 25.
Almost certainly not.
Yeah.
Okay? Boise State, absolutely not. SMU, I think yes, weirdly. I think SMU, because of that oil money situation.
They're wealthy alumni.
And it's called like
donors.
what's it called? Like the Mustang Club or something weird.
Yeah.
They've got like it's a whole thing, right? So we're not sure about that one, but I'm gonna err on the side of yes.
If they're not, they're somewhere in the 20s, you'd think.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll put them in there.
So SMU probably, right? Alabama, yes. Arizona State, no. Okay.
Yeah.
Miami, yes.
Yes.
Ole Miss,
Yes.
yes. South Carolina, yes. Clemson, yes. And this is where it gets really interesting. I think your line of demarcation, now we're getting out of the top 15. BYU, no. Iowa State, no. Missouri, as much as they would like to say yes, no.
Yeah, probably not.
Illinois, no. Syracuse, no. Army, hell no.
Yeah.
Colorado, I think maybe yes.
Yeah.
Okay. UNLV, no. Memphis, no.
Yeah.
So depending on whether we're correct or not about teams like SMU and maybe Missouri because they're an SEC school, I'm not sure, right?
And they've been good the last 2 years. Maybe they've been able to fundraise a ton off of that.
But basically 10 of the top 25 teams are not top NIL teams.
Yeah, that is interesting because when Witt said it the first time, we all were like, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, of
duh.
course. And
but
look, the
did
top,
not play out that way this year.
The top 5, the top 10, if you want to crack that, you probably have to be a big player in NIL. Obviously, Boise got into that at some point this year. BYU got into that at some point this year. I'm talking about final rankings. These are the final ones going in to the college football playoff, and there's going to be very slight shuffling around of that, but it's going to be the same teams in the top 25, right, for the most part, when we get the final college football rankings after Ohio State and Notre Dame. So obviously Oregon's not going to be number 1 anymore, even if they are the number 1 NIL school.
No, yeah, they're not. Take that, Jeff Schwartz.
And look, Ohio State, it probably is a race between Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon this year to see who actually spent the most money on their player roster.
Probably.
So those teams, they were all big-time players. They were all semifinalists. I'm not here to tell you that NIL does not matter, but the direct correlation, or I should say it this way, the correlation might not be as direct as we want it to be. And when I say want it to be, it's probably don't want it to be because Utah, BYU, Utah State, most schools in the Big 12 are not actually going to be part of that top 25 NIL conversation.
Yeah, gives you hope for the local teams here that they can still be a factor in the playoff if this holds true year in, year out. But
like this year we think that one Big 12 school was top 25 in NIL funding, and that was Colorado.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State, maybe because of the Boone Pickens money.
I could see them.
However,
and they did retain a lot of talent going into this season. That
they brought back an entire starting offensive line.
That would suggest, and the going into the season, the number 1 running back in the nation obviously didn't play out that way. Yes. Hello, Ashton Genty. Emergence.
I think Alan Bowman might have had to pay to be on the team.
He probably did. But that would suggest that they had pretty good depth of funds to be able to bring back that much talent.
But okay, so and there's such a non-factor in the way it plays out. Like the way the assertion, and I'm not doing this to single out and point out the one time Coach Witt is wrong about something. I'm doing this to because there are a lot of coaches.
See, Witt, you're wrong sometimes.
Every athletic department right now is operating under the assumption that hey, we have to get to this top 25 in funding. NIL funding, or we're screwed in college football. And if your only value assessment on a team's worth or a season's worth is you have to win a national championship, I guess that's right because we're not going to see a team win a national championship that's outside of the top 25 in NIL or probably outside of the top 10 in NIL anytime soon. But we use this top 25 ranking as the sort of general, that was a good season. You ended the season ranked. 10 straight seasons as a ranked team, 5 straight seasons as a ranked team. This is like the feather in the cap that we have all collectively agreed makes it a worthwhile season. And there's still plenty of access to this, even if you're working with less money. Now, Utah and BYU they're in a step above where Army's at, where UNLV is at, where Memphis is at. I think maybe even where like Illinois is at. I'm not sure what Illinois' NIL fund looks like.
You would think that BYU and Utah have had a lot better football tradition, recent and historically than Illinois.
And
you would hope that it would be better.
Even though Illinois benefits from being in the Big Ten, they don't benefit NIL-wise from being in the Big Ten necessarily.
Their priorities historically have been more on the basketball program than football.
And interestingly enough, I think in terms of like South Carolina, I don't know about Missouri, Ole Miss, like these are teams that are very definitively, in my opinion, playing in that range, top 25 NIL fund range. And they're going to have a very, very hard time. I looked at that spring football roster for Utah, and yeah, there's some names that you read and you say, yeah, that's going to be an all-conference guy. They had to pay that guy a lot of money. But then there's a bunch of other guys on this roster that are still the same kind of players that Utah always had, the same kind of players that Utah always developed. And this fearful departure of what made Utah football great for so long, and this nervousness that, hey, it's a bygone era that Utah and Kyle Whittingham were able to succeed in, and now we have no idea if they're going to be able to replicate that Pac-12 success, that Mountain West Conference success in this new world of name, image, and likeness, open transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. I look at the roster, and we're going to take a deeper dive into the spring roster as the show progresses today. Scott Mitchell is going to join us at noon. We'll do some of that there, and then, of course, in the noon hour, we'll spend a lot of time on it. But the idea that you can't be a factor on the national scene in college football unless you are a top 25 NIL fund is not yet true. And I think that there are a lot of frustrated fans who think that may be the case. Or there are a lot of desperate fans who think that may be the case. Hey, I gotta renew my season tickets, and I gotta also donate to the NIL fund so that we can keep Smith Snowden in a Utah uniform. Like, if you have the ability and the desire to do that, go ahead and do it. But don't allow it to affect your fandom if you don't want it to.
Know that you don't have to yet.
Yeah,
like that kind of thing. Like if you're feeling like, oh, in order for our team to be good, I gotta open up my wallet even more and stretch myself a little thinner. Don't do it. Like you don't have to do it.
If we are moving toward that place, and maybe we are, but if we are moving toward that place, we can address it year by year. But there were at least 9 teams that are going to finish in the top 25 this year that buck that trend. And I know that at Utah, people want to see a national championship.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
And 2 of those teams you're talking about made the playoff, Indiana and ASU. Like you have access to the playoff if you're not quite a top 25 NIL fund school, at least I would think at this coming year too. And
there's a chicken and the egg thing that's going to happen. That discussion is going to be ongoing because Oregon is going to win a championship under Dan Lanning, and people are going to say, well, it's because of the money, not because Dan Lanning's a great coach. It's actually because of both. But the chicken is going to be called the money, right? And in the case of a team like Arizona State, the money is the egg. The chicken is Kenny Dillingham and a quality culture came first. And now they're going to get some NIL money. Now they're going to get to be a factor there because they're in a major metropolitan area. They have a bunch of alum that have been kind of sleepy and turned off for a while who are going to look at this and just be like, oh, we're humming. We're humming in football now. That atmosphere, like that stadium is going to be bumping. That's going to be a thing. And the money in that case, the NIL money, the top 25 fund, if it happens, and it probably will at some point at Arizona State, is not the chicken. It's the egg. It is the result of what they were able to do. If Boise State could ever crack that, I don't know that's possible, but that's going to be the egg, not the chicken. It's not the money that causes Boise State to be good. It's money that comes from Boise State being good. And for whatever reason, that feels like it's better for me as a college football fan. If BYU cracks that next year, and I said this when NIL became a thing, I was doing Pac-12 radio. I said, you want to talk about two teams with a serious chance to move up the ladder? Because everyone else is going to stay where they're at, and that has mostly been the case. BYU's got a chance because BYU has a bunch of very successful, passionate, borderline obsessed alumni that are willing to pay for success. And in basketball, you're seeing that a lot more directly. But after an 11-win season in football, I promise you, BYU's NIL fund in 2025 is much bigger than it was in 2024. Again, that's the egg. The chicken is Kalani Sitake instilling belief, finding the right quarterback, the right leadership council, and finding Jay Hill, and it all coming together. That's the chicken. The egg is the money. At Ohio State, the money might be the chicken. At Oregon, the money might be the chicken. It's really, in all these cases, both. Texas's money is what got them Steve Sarkisian and got them all these players. So in Texas, the money is the chicken. I, for whatever reason, would rather watch a team be successful where the money is the egg. Am I saying chicken and egg too much to start off the show? Is there are people getting confused, James, now that I've said chicken and egg too many times? Am I just making people hungry?
It's becoming screen assist of this show. Yeah.
I think it's becoming
the screen.
Wait, so what kind of eggs? Is Arizona State, is that like an over easy egg? What is that?
No, I'm following you.
Okay.
I'm following you. So the result and the source.
Yeah.
Chicken being the source, the egg being the result. Yeah.
I could have said it just.
Following you.
I just could have said the source.
Yeah.
And the result, but I said chicken and egg.
Yeah.
Because
you're creative.
I'm animal friendly.
And you're a writer. You're a wordsmith.
And I'm hungry. ESPN 792.1 FM have a cash kickoff going on right now. Time for your shot to win $1,000 to pay the bills. Text PAYDAY to 508-777-1000 for your chance to win. That's 508-777-1000. This is a nationwide contest. Payday to 508-777-1000. All right, we'll take a break from this. Tom Callahan, host of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club, is going to join us next at Tom Talks on Twitter if you're not already following, and on Blue Sky. Oh, excuse me. More active on Blue Sky than on Twitter.
Yeah, he specifically told me if you're going to shout out his social media, shout out the Blue Sky.
Tom Talks on Blue Sky. That's my bad, Tom. I'm just so wired to be like, it's on Twitter. I like that. People are moving to the Blue Sky. A little more positivity in life. Tom Callahan to talk hockey next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. That sound courtesy of Smith Entertainment Group Media. Matt McConnell on the call. It was Josh Doan getting the scoring started. First of 3 goals for the Utah Hockey Club. Ended up giving up 5, though, to the Canadiens of Montreal for a second straight loss on home ice. Tom Callahan, host of Locked On Utah Hockey Club, Utah Hockey Club Insider, joins us right now on the Sean O'Connell Show to talk about your black and blue. Tom, how are you?
I'm okay. I think black and blue is an apt description right now for these guys.
A little beat up philosophically at the very least. A team that, look, it feels like they start to get some things figured out, and you see the chances being created and the chances going in, but then you get a breakdown on the blue line, or you get a couple errors in goal. What has been the biggest obstacle recently for this team putting it all together and building a win streak and some momentum?
It's initially it was the injuries, and now we're starting to see some guys get healthy, right? Which is great news. But here's the impact of that is that every time you add a body back to the lineup, and in this case we added John Marino back to the lineup, who has not played there all season, you've got to find a fit. And every single time, it adjusts the chemistry a little bit. It adjusts the defensive pairings, or if it's a forward who comes back, it adjusts the lines when guys are in and out of the lineup. And it's kind of been a state of constant flux for a lot of this Utah lineup. And many coaches will tell you, and I'll use this same line, those are reasons, but they're not excuses. However, they are reasons that Utah Hockey Club has struggled to find consistency. There's other reasons too, but that's really what it's been, is they're struggling to find consistency, and that is a reason why.
So when that's true of the roster, and obviously it is, and that's true of the lineup, and you have certain guys that are the constants, that are sort of the staples, that are, the Kellers when he's healthy, the Sergachevs, that you got to get him on the ice. In Sergachev's case, you have him skating probably way more minutes than someone should be skating at this level. Are those guys frustrated by that? Is it something that you have to start worrying about from a coaching standpoint in managing the, look, I know I'm leaning on you to do this and be that constant presence while we shuffle the deck around you, or is that a role that these guys are okay with and relish potentially?
Well, and that's personality by personality, but at this point, when you lose winnable games, which I think they've done in the last 2, I do understand the frustration. And it can grow in there, and everybody's different, right? Some guys will just kind of tuck it deep inside and channel it into their gameplay. Some guys will be a little more outward and vocal about it, or you see some eye rolls or some body language on the bench. We should see trying to get out there and finish his checks every night, play physical. As a matter of fact, that whole line. And when they do, they win. I mean, look at the first game of this homestand, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, that line had a combined, I'm trying to think, but I think it was something like 15 hits. That's what you want to see. You want to see them driving the bus, because I believe they can. And, yeah, you're going to have guys in and out offensively, defensively, but the game that they are built or theoretically built to play is physical, finish your checks, get in on the forecheck, puck pursuit, and puck possession. They're supposed to be a big physical team that can intimidate other teams. They just don't always play that way. And if there is one lingering frustration for this team, it's the fact that they have not consistently grown into the identity that it seems like they were built to be.
So that's a very fascinating thing in every sport, and we're learning how fascinating it can be in the NHL, as a lot of us are relative neophytes here. But is that because of actual physical limitation, or is the personnel there? Do they have the size to be that physical team? Do they have the actual talent, like the physical talent to be that team with that identity? Or are we finding out that the philosophy placed by the general manager, placed by ownership, placed by the coach doesn't necessarily fit the personnel the way that we would like it to?
And that's an excellent question. It really is. And I'm sure it's one a lot of fans are asking, right? Because you look at, is it the GM? Is it the coach? Is it the players? And the answer really is it's a bit of a mix. And I've been following this team and was a part of this team when they were in Arizona, and seeing how there's been a lot of change in this organization. This is probably the first time in my recent memory that they've really had a settled leadership group up top in hockey operations over the course of several years. So knowing that, there is still a certain extent of trying to weed things out, get through. Like this year, they had to remember in the summer, and I know a lot of people forget this, they had to build an entirely new defensive core. They had no one signed going into the draft. So in a way, you build through free agency, and they did. They made a couple of trades. They blockbuster for Sergachev to bring those guys in, but they bring in a Cole, they bring in a Bortuzzo, they trade for an Olimata, but these were guys that were not here. And so what they're trying to do at this point is almost a little bit of build the plane while they're flying it this season. And so I think they are working towards the goal and the vision of what Bill Armstrong, the GM, thinks they need to be. And Armstrong has confidence in Andre Tourigny to be his guy as far as the head coaching and the philosophy and the systems. But it's going to still take them a while to really get everybody implemented. The homegrown talent is still coming up. This year, in a lot of ways, I think they really hoped for the best when they assembled this team. But realistically, and they'll never say this, but we can say it, right, because we're the outsiders, the way it was built didn't really imply year one success. And I never put that pressure on them. I know a lot of outsiders were saying, oh, these guys are a playoff team. They're a playoff team. I'm like, there's no way these guys are a playoff team. But they've hung in the conversation, which is excellent. I love that for them, and I appreciate that for them. But just they're not going to be consistent yet. And even once they start getting, once Thursday comes back, that's going to be another tremendous add. But again, roster in flux. So is the personnel there? Not 100% yet, no. And that's something they're building towards and trying to assemble. And there are some guys, I bet you, at the trade deadline, if they're on the outside looking in, they're going to be cautious sellers. Some of those one-year deals, some of those low-risk players, like a Cole, like a Bortuzzo, could go other places in return for assets.
Tom Callahan, my guest for another minute or two here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking Utah Hockey Club at Tom Talks on Blue Sky. More active there than on Twitter right now. So you mentioned Marino, and he was one of the people that I thought were going to be, a huge part of the defensive presence for this Utah Hockey Club team. And injury has kept him out of that. It stands to reason that when you get your first minutes back on the ice, it's not going to be perfect with your individual performance or your chemistry with the guys around you. But in a perfect world, how big of an asset is Marino back in the lineup for this Utah Hockey Club?
He's going to be big because he'll settle down the middle of the defense. And just to keep it short, he looked rusty in his return. That's to be expected. Second most minutes of any D in that game, though, last night. So I think as he gets more acclimated and back into it, you're going to see him settle into a 3-4 pair role. And I think that what that's going to allow him to do is to kind of aid the offense. He's going to be a good first pass guy, but he's also got to play some physical minutes. And he's not going to get top line defensive matchups, which means, Sean, that he is going to be able to help shut down second and third line attacks and maybe do a little bit more offensively. So that'll be a big get once he's in complete game shape.
How does this team create more consistent chances and have them find the back of the net more often?
Puck possession. And it's a million little things that add up to puck possession. It's zone entries. It's the forecheck. It's supporting the puck side support, meaning, so if you're in a pile in the corner, you don't want your forward supporting the puck below that pile. You want them above the pile, because if the defense wins the battle and the puck comes up the board, you retrieve it. If it goes further down, then you just barrel further down into the zone. So all those little things, making those passes and recoveries into the zone and just being aggressive. But puck possession is really the catch-all term for how they're going to improve the quantity and quality of offensive chances.
Tom, when do we get the official name announced? Or is it going to stay Utah Hockey Club? I will ask every insider this question every time, by the way. I'm not just giving you the unfair treatment.
No, I don't mind it at all because I know what it takes to try to put the merchandising, the jerseys, the logo, all that stuff together. I mean, I understand why it's been delayed. I know fans are a little itchy, but you know what? You're probably going to see a big announcement following the season. I guarantee you, though, it'll be between the end of the season and the draft because they're not going to go to the draft with the same sweaters they have now. They're going to want the new logo, name, colors, identity out there. Then they may reveal it at a draft party.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to more conversations with you. Thanks for your time today. Always great insight.
Love having. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Tom Callahan, host of Locked On Utah Hockey Club at Tom Talks on Blue Sky. If you're not already on Blue Sky, it's probably time to sign up. There's a lot of people that are leaping from the X/Twitter platform over to Blue Sky. Seems like Tom might be one of them. All right. Hot Lunch is coming, brought to you by Lemon Shark Poke. In the first edition of the Hot Lunch, we're probably going to do like a little double Hot Lunch today. In this one, we're going to take a look at Utah's updated spring football roster, and we're going to decide collectively, all of us, on the offense, what position group is the strongest. Stay tuned for that. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Time for the hot lunch here on the Sean O'Connell Show. And then in 9 minutes, we'll have Scott Mitchell, the Utah football legend, longtime NFL quarterback. Lots to talk about with him. We had a Utah press conference right here on these airwaves yesterday. Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scalley, Jason Beck, the new offensive coordinator, all sat down, answered some questions, offered some statements. And one of the things that we got this week was an updated spring football roster. Of course, the coaches were talking about their player personnel on some level, and those guys are in winter conditioning. They're adding poundage right now if they're supposed to be big. They're paring weight off if they're supposed to be leaner. And they're getting ready for spring football, which, of course, rolls around before you can expect. I mean, as a player, you've got everything is chopped up into like 4 weeks. You got like 4 weeks of winter conditioning, and then you got like a bunch of spring football, and then you've got your summer running, and then before you know it, camp is here. So I decided to take a look at the updated spring football roster, which, of course, sees a couple of names that people wish were still here off the roster. Keanu Tanuvasa, he's at BYU. Samote Pepa, he's at Washington. Cam Calhoun, he's at the University of Alabama. But I looked at this roster, and I decided to go position by position to see where the offense is strongest, where the defense is strongest. I put those units up on a Twitter poll for you. I broke it down. I left the quarterback room out because the quarterback room, we spent a lot of time in recent years talking about how strong and how deep Utah's quarterback room is, and I think the football gods punished us for it. Oh my gosh, these guys not only do they have Cam Rising, but look, they brought in this Heward kid, and they got Isaac Wilson, and then Luke Batari the last 2 years has had to start at least a game.
And best win percentage the last couple of years.
And he's the one who's undefeated. So I'm not talking about depth or anything other than Devin Dampier right now in the quarterback room.
Football gods, let us be clear. We are not over-exaggerating the talent in the quarterback room.
Football gods, I am not flirting with disaster here, all right? So I want to start with the offense. Which offensive position room is in the best spot right now based on the updated spring football roster? I cheated a little bit because I did throw Dorian Singer on the wide receiver one. He's not on the updated spring roster. He's appealing to try and get another year of eligibility.
Cheating. That's 15 for cheating.
No, that's first of all, cheating is not an actual penalty. You have to call it something like illegal procedure.
How is cheating not a penalty?
It's too general. It's too broad.
You're cheating.
James. Okay. How awesome would that be if every time a flag was thrown, instead of telling you the specific penalty, instead of 10 yards for holding, they're just like 10-yard cheating.
That's only a 5-yard cheating.
That was a 5-yard cheating penalty.
That's just a loss of down cheating. That's not a yardage.
Because effectively, that's what penalties are. They're just they're different categories of cheating.
Yeah,
you're breaking the rule.
Fouls in basketball, same thing, right? Cheating. He forearm to the face. That's a cheating foul.
Technical cheat. To the stripe. Go. All right. No, we're gonna go position room by position room. Okay, and I might have cheated a tiny bit here by adding Dorian Singer. That's hopeful, though. Okay, that's optimism coming through. You know, my sunny personality, my constant, just irrepressible optimism is always there.
You light up the room. We don't even have to turn the lights on most days. It just lights up the room.
So at wide receiver, look, there's not enough characters in a Twitter post to list out all these guys' names, but you've got Dorian Singer, Otto Tia, Whittemore, who came in the transfer portal, Luca Caldarella, Dadron Zipper, et cetera, okay? The tight end room, so deep last year. Dallin Bentley, Landon King, a bunch of young guys. Wayshawn Parker in the running back room. Rogers, Green. The offensive line, very, very interesting. Logan Fano, Caleb Lomu. The Taaga kid who came in from USC, Jaron Kump, has more eligibility. A couple of years ago, the Corner Canyon kid, Isaac Garcia, was the number 1 recruit in the class for the University of Utah. Michael Mokafisi's got more eligibility. Zaraway Williams, I didn't put him on the list. He's this massive 6'8" freak of a human being. Offensive line right now, James, is running away with it in the vote. Offensive line, 72% of respondents are saying that is the deepest, best, strongest position room in the Utah offense right now. The demise of Utah football has been greatly exaggerated if we actually roll into fall 2025 with the offensive line as a strong position group. That is where you build successful offenses. That is where you build winning teams at the line of scrimmage. If it plays out that Utah's offensive line is the strength of the offense, with Devin Dampier, the guy who only got sacked 4 times last year because of his mobility, with him as your quarterback, come on, James. This is reason for optimism right here. You
Absolutely.
just have to look at the roster itself and say, where do we now look, do you need more playmakers? Yes, you do. Always. There's not a team in college football who doesn't want more playmakers. Is there a Jeremiah Smith on this roster? Probably not. Is there a Britton Covey on this roster? Maybe you can find him. Maybe there is somebody here, right? Is there a Tavion Thomas? Not the off-the-field Tavion Thomas. Is there an on-field Tavion Thomas or a Zach Moss or a whomever in that running back room? Right now you got like 3 guys who actually have real big-time college football experience, and the rest, question mark. But I'm not afraid of playing a freshman running back. I'm not afraid of playing a guy who transferred in and got overlooked somewhere else.
Especially a guy like Parker transferring in, same OC as before. I have some pretty big expectations for Wayshawn Parker in this Utah offense. I would think that Utah fans should too.
Wayshawn Parker, I think, is the guy that a lot of people think will be your running back starter eventually. And Wayshawn came from Washington State.
Oh, excuse me, Washington State. Didn't the New Mexico running back come in too?
Also came in. Wayshawn.
That's my bad.
Wayshawn had 137 carries for 735 yards. Blow the whistle on yourself. Cheating.
There you go. Cheating said the wrong name. My bad.
Wait, that's not actually cheating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just being wrong. It's a typo verbally.
If being wrong is cheating, then the Cowboys cheat every year, right?
Nakari Rogers is the New Mexico running back that came in. He spent his first 2 years at Campbell College. Is that not the Camels? The Campbell Camels? It's a great mascot. College basketball tournaments are coming up, by the way, and we will be doing an obscure mascot challenge.
Love it.
So anyone out there, if you want to win some prizes, if you want to be, when we do our topical trivia at the end of the show, you want some tickets to like PBR or some comedy show or a concert, do the work now. Start studying up your obscure college basketball team mascots.
Gordy likes to do a modified list around the NCAA tournament where it's like a quiz on the mascots for the teams in the tournament. I get about half right. That's just tough. Some of those you're like, I don't know what Furman is.
You don't know that the Furman is the Panthers, Paladins?
Do you know what
it's the Paladins? Furman's the Paladins.
Are they the purple Paladins specifically?
They are.
They might be, okay.
They are purple Paladins. It's like you're playing World of Warcraft.
Love it.
Why did I say Panthers? I'm embarrassed. Anyway, go at Real OC Sports, 877-353-0700 if you want to weigh in on the Dish Pros text line. The strength, position room-wise, of the Utah offense is which position room? Is it going to be wide receiver, tight end, running back, or is it the offensive line? Let us know. Hour 2 begins next with Scott Mitchell, the Utah football legend. I'm going to ask him that question. You're listening to ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
Dorian would like nothing more than to return with us. I can't give you percentages or anything like that. I can tell you that it's in process right now, and we're trying every which way to see if we can get him one more year. I know the NC2A is talking about going 5 years to play 5, and if that is in fact adopted, what's the criteria as far as how it's implemented? Is it guys that just finished that didn't have all 5 years, did they get to come back? Does it start with a new freshman somewhere in between? We don't know that, but the bottom line is we would love to have Dorian in the program for another year if we can somehow make that work.
That's Kyle Whittingham at yesterday's press conference. He was asked about the potential of Dorian Singer coming back for another year of eligibility with Utah football, and those efforts are underway. Dorian has to make the application. The NCAA has to approve, and, of course, Utah would be very thrilled to have him back. Fans, players, and nobody would like to have him back more than Devin Dampier. But with Dorian Singer's name being a question mark and a potential addition to the roster, re-addition to the roster for next year, let's rewind a little bit and remember exactly the situation we were in 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, where, and I know I contributed somewhat to this because I was just as worried as a lot of you are, but there was a time where people were sticking a fork in the Utah football culture as we know it and saying it is done. People don't want to be here anymore. The coaches aren't getting along. Players aren't working hard. There's no level of accountability. All of these things were these like panic reactions from Utah fans to what was a really unfortunate bad year of Utah football. In reality, guys were rallying, guys were playing hard, guys were staying close to one another. Were there a couple of disgruntled employees? Absolutely, yes. That is the case in every organization. That is the case in every football team. That unfortunately was the case with guys that a lot of people had an affection for and would have liked to see stick around. The Jalen Glovers of the world. It just didn't work out. But there was an overreaction to the losses that had a lot of folks questioning whether or not Kyle Whittingham still had the fastball, and more importantly, whether the culture was intact. I asked the question to Mekhi Bernard when he came on. I asked the question to Morgan Scalley. I asked the question to everybody with any Utah football title attached to their name. I asked everyone, is this the same program, the same team, the same culture that we think it is? And one of the questions about whether or not it was going to be answered by people like Dorian Singer, a player like Dorian Singer who came in and played his ass off, blocked away from the ball, ran his routes hard, and just didn't have the quarterback play to support his talent. This dude is one of the best wide receivers in the Big 12 Conference. In an ideal world, Dorian Singer is more than capable of being a 1,000-yard, 8 to 12 touchdown type receiver. He didn't get that at USC. He didn't get that at the University of Utah. It would be so easy for Dorian to be like, you know what? I don't like this place. They didn't get me the ball enough. I did my part. I was no block, no rock. Well, I was blocking. I was doing what I was supposed to do. And I still didn't get the treatment, the production, the whatever that I was supposed to get. If the Utah football culture was broken, was fractured to a point of disrepair, was shaken down to its foundation, a guy who was new to the program and who was not rewarded with stats by coming into the program would be the first one that would rattle and shake and depart and have bad things to say. And when the quarterback situation, it became clear that you had to add some talent and that Devin Dampier was a likely candidate to follow his offensive coordinator from New Mexico and be part of this Utah football team, who do you think was the first phone call Devin Dampier made from a player standpoint? Dorian Singer and Devin Dampier are brothers. Now, whether or not they are full-blooded biological brothers is irrelevant here because when Dorian was asked about it on Twitter and someone qualified it and said, I think they're half siblings, he corrected and said, no, we don't do half siblings. That's my brother. So whatever that means from a biological, like 23andMe standpoint, I don't know. Are they cousins? Are they same mom and dad? Is one of them adopted? Are they just family friends that call each other brothers? Like, we're very familiar with that, especially with the Polynesian culture around here. I don't know, but it doesn't matter, right? They're brothers. They identify one another as that's my brother, okay? So who do you think Devin Dampier called first and foremost when the possibility of transferring to Utah came up? Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer had every right and every reason to say, look, dude, you don't want to come here. You want to be a quarterback that ends up playing in the NFL. You want to be a quarterback who's featured in an offense, whose arm talent is developed. That hasn't been happening here, at least when I watch. Devin Dampier leaning on the advice of Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer very easily and probably justifiably could have been like, dude, I'm sorry. I wish it was different here, but we did not get good quarterback play, and I don't know that this is going to be the right situation. I myself, if I end up getting more eligibility, I'm on my way out of here because this was not the right spot. It would have been understandable if he had that to say. He has never had that to say. The demise of the Utah football culture has been greatly exaggerated if Dorian Singer is willing and excited to come back and play for a team that he did a lot of right things for and he didn't get rewarded. I mean, this is a guy who should be off to the NFL draft if last year had gone the way he wanted it to, if Cam Rising had stayed healthy and he would have been the 1,000-yard receiver that everyone wished he would have been. This is a tiny little subplot in a much, much larger story for Utah football, but it's so important to pay attention to because we can very easily get really worried when Keanu Tanuvasa, a foundational staple-type talent and personality on this team, decides like, you know what, I'm gone in the transfer portal. I'm headed down to BYU. It's the panic reaction that a lot of fans have or at least had, is very understandable in that regard. But when Kyle Whittingham sits down in a somewhat unexpected press conference, at least on the normal calendar standpoint, and says, yeah, we might actually get Dorian Singer back. And, yeah, Dorian wants to come back and play, and he wants to be in this offense. You think that there's not other teams interested in Dorian Singer's services? You think that Dorian Singer couldn't have said, Devin Dampier, let's squat up and let's go somewhere else. You and me can be on the same team again like we were in high school, and we can do it wherever we want. Wherever we want is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but they could have done it somewhere else. And instead, they're both, at least Devin Dampier, already here, signed, ready to play for the University of Utah. And hopefully, Dorian Singer will be joining him for an extra year of eligibility. After a season that was, from a results standpoint, both personally and on the team level for Dorian, disastrous, he still wants to be in a Utah uniform. Pay attention to that if you're a Utah fan. Bite down on that if you're worried about this team culture. That is an example that you can cite to say, well, you know what, it's not as bad as I thought it was. So my very sincere hope is that the NCAA and everybody else says, all right, Dorian Singer, extra year of eligibility, you're back. Let's do this thing. Utah football legend Scott Mitchell joins me now on the Sean O'Connell Show, part of our Big 12 at Noon coverage brought to you by Mountainland Supply. Visit mountainlandsupply.com for more details. Scott Mitchell, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful sitting there listening to you talk about Dorian Singer coming back for an extra year. It's like, I think Oprah Winfrey is actually running the NCAA right now. It's like, you get an extra year and you get an extra year. So Dorian Singer is going to be coming back next year. Oprah's running this thing. It's, everyone's happy and everyone gets an amazing car.
You know what? If Oprah's favorite things are another scholarship year for Dorian Singer, sign me up to be in that studio audience. I want that. It was a mulligan on last year for Dorian Singer, please, because this is a dude, and I know that you were calling the games and you watched this and you're talking to him, and like this is a guy who, even when it became very apparent he was not going to end up having the year that he anticipated having at the University of Utah, he still did things the right way. He still played hard. He ran his routes. He blocked away from the ball. And even though that should be common, Scott, it's not necessarily a 100% proposition in college football that a star or potential star wide receiver is going to do those things when he's not being rewarded with stats. Why was Utah and Dorian, I guess collectively, still able to do this, play the right way, even when it wasn't working out from a stat standpoint?
Yeah, so much of it is really on the player, and it's probably why he got to play a lot, is because he had that team-first mindset. It's real easy to go, hey, I'm a receiver, I catch the football. I'm a running back, I run with the football. I'm a quarterback, I throw the football, and everyone kind of gets in their own little silo. But when you have guys that buy into, hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes with my part on the field for us to be successful, because every play requires everyone doing things the right way. I mean, most of the time, I think Tony Dorsett in the mid-'70s actually ran the longest touchdown in the NFL, and the Cowboys only had 5 guys on the field. They were like on the 1-yard line against the Minnesota Vikings. He scores a touchdown. They only had 10 guys. But aside from that, you need everyone doing their job in order to have consistent success on the field. And you love, I know I love guys, wide receivers that were willing to block down the field and do those extra things. And you had running backs that were willing to block and pass protection and not just, hey, I'm just a runner here. And when you get guys buying into that, that's when you can have a lot of success. And that's what's really fun. Is it fun that we lose and I have 1 million yards receiving, or that we win and I have a pretty solid game? And I'm a big factor in a lot of the success we have, because that's what Utah is going to be moving forward. It's going to be a balanced offense. It's not a one-man show. It's not a one-guy show, and that's a good thing. And especially if they can run things, Jason Beck can run his offense the way he wants to. Utah can be very explosive and very dynamic in both running and throwing the football.
I asked this question kind of in general, shouted it out into the ether, and I want to ask someone who's been close to this program for a long time and has been at the highest level and knows all about locker room dynamics and team culture and coaching changes and the stuff that can happen with that. We always discuss what it means to be a Utah football player, and Kyle Whittingham has been very open and candid about the fact that it's harder for these guys to learn that because of the transfer portal. Well, now on the offensive side of the ball, in one particular room, you have something very unique. There is no returning anything in the running back room for Utah. Mark Ottawaya comes in as the new running backs coach, and everybody who has an opportunity to get some playing time is new. There's nobody who has reps. There's nobody who's been on the field for Utah as a running back in that room to kind of show that room in particular how to do things. With that being the case, new coach, all new players, how does the running back room specifically buy in and become part of the Utah football culture seamlessly?
Well, I think if you have everyone on equal footing, and I don't think that you do. I mean, I think Utah knows they probably have a number one guy, and there's a pecking order there. But when you come into a situation like happening, and I think you come into a coach in an offensive coordinator in Jason Beck, who just said, look, we're going to identify who's good and who can get the job done. And we're going to build our offense around what we can do and what we do well. And that's where we're going to be. And so you come in as a running back, specifically because they're all new, and you go, I got a shot. Show up, show out, and that means these guys are really going to be putting forth an effort and their best effort, and you're going to get it from everyone. You get a coach, like Andy Ludwig did some amazing things at Utah, and over time, you have have a relationship with players, and so you kind of, some guys know, man, I'm probably not going to see the field, and that gets demoralizing. And then their production and their effort and their attitude even sometimes can be counter to the culture. So having it new and fresh and everyone's kind of on the same slate really gives everyone an opportunity to put their best foot forward and really, take a chance. Now, you're only going to get that opportunity now to really instill that. And on top of it, the coaches need to recognize and identify the guys that are playing and doing those things, and that those guys are playing. The worst thing you can have as a player is that a coach doesn't follow through on his words, and so then you start losing trust. And so if the coaches do what they say, then the players have a lot more trust to now, all right, I'm going to really put forth more effort. I'm going to buy into what these guys are selling here. And the biggest thing I'm selling, if I'm a Utah coach, is, last year was an anomaly. This, like there's a lot of talent in that building still. That defense is going to be really good again next year, and there's a lot of good things. The offensive line is going to be pretty solid this year, and the quarterback situation may end up being it may fit well with what they want to do. And so this team isn't that far off, and they're not that far off in a league that's not that elite. Utah's going to have a chance to be in every single game they're in next year, and that's a great thing to feel and know. But so the culture is we can win, and we can win now, and we can go to a conference championship, and we get in the college football playoffs. And when you have that, Sean, that's you want to try, and you want to try to win, and you're more motivated than, man, we got no shot. We're the I don't know, the Purdue of the Big Ten, or the Kentucky of the SEC. Like, we can try as hard as we want. We're never going to get there.
Scott Mitchell for another minute or two here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking Utah football. What was the best sack number, the lowest number of sacks you took in a season?
I don't know that it's a thing I remember. I want to say, well, I know this. So when you play for the Miami Dolphins, like if the quarterback got sacked, especially with Dan Marino there, you basically got cut. So now with the Detroit Lions and Barry Sanders, the quarterback getting sacked wasn't the biggest priority in the world. It's like, okay, fine. If Barry got hurt or if Barry got touched, that was a different thing. So the motivation of these offensive linemen is different. But I think I want to say probably 1995 maybe. I wasn't sacked a lot in my, believe it or not. I wasn't a guy that took a lot of hits, and quite frankly, I could take a hit when I did get hit. So
well, you are a large man, Scott. Yeah. The original Ben Roethlisberger before Ben Roethlisberger.
Well, Reggie White would run at me, and I'd look at him and say, "Reggie, do you really want to mess with me today? Look at me. You really want to hit this today?" and and then he'd pick me up off the ground. He says, "I sure do."
So James is looking up the stats. James says that the in the NFL, 7 sacks in 93 was the lowest number that you registered?
Yeah, so ProFootballReference.com, Scott, has time sacked for quarterbacks, and you played at least 7 games, 5 straight years, according to the Pro Football Reference, and 93, that first season that you played that many games, you were sacked only 7 times.
See, and that was the Miami Dolphins, see?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. The reason I asked that question is because Devin Dampier played the whole year for New Mexico last year, was only sacked 4 times.
Yeah.
Not because he had a great offensive line either. Like that is such a wild stat to me. Led the nation, by the way, number 1 in the nation. And does that mean that this offensive line for the University of Utah is going to look better because of his escapability? Does that mean that this kid is going to just have a great passing year because now he's got a decent offensive line in front of him? I mean,
well, Yeah. So when Utah was good and went to Pac-12 championships, they had Tyler Huntley, Cam Ward, and a lot of times they made a lot of plays when things broke down. And Devin Dampier is that same type of player. He has that same type of dynamic. And the thing that he may have that is even better, as Jason Beck alluded to, is that he's a savvy runner. And savvy runners usually know how to not get hit. Sometimes Cam Ward was like, no, I want to get hit. And he would look for kind of some violent, collisions, which over time really wear you out. And so having a quarterback that's an efficient runner as well, and a guy that can elude sacks, I mean, that's a nightmare for a defense to have to handle. And again, another reason why you should be excited about this Utah football team this year is you're going to have a quarterback that can get you out of bad situations and also protect himself while he's doing it.
So before I let you go, I put some poll questions up based on the updated spring football roster, the names we know, even a couple of names we're not super familiar with, and kind of compiled what the running back room, the wide receiver room, the tight end room, and the offensive line room is supposed to look like at the University of Utah. Of course, you got a spring transfer portal window that's going to open, and we'll see. Actually, I have a question for you about that too. So this won't be my last question, but the question on Twitter was, the poll question is, which is the room in the best shape right now heading into 2025? Running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, or O-line? Without probably having the roster right in front of you, do you have a sense of which one of those rooms is in the best shape?
Well, if I was to rank them, I think I might go offensive line 1, and then 1 and then 2, A and B would be wide receivers and running backs, and then 3 would be quarterback or would be tight ends. And you've lost a lot. You have some good guys, in the tight end room, but you've lost a transfer portal guy. You've lost some graduation guys. The wide receiver, I like some of these young guys. That'll be the fun thing to watch is some of these young wide receivers that you saw play, Zipper and Zachariah, and you saw those guys play at the end of the year and go, wow, those guys have some talent. And to see how they blossom from year 1 to year 2. And then the running back room, there's some guys in there. This freshman from Washington State is a player, and he was very productive. And you've got a hungry room there and a good coach. And so they'll be there. But you've got 2 offensive tackles for Utah that are pretty darn good that they have back. So, again, this team is in a good position to be very competitive next year across the board, offense and defense.
Your response reflects the response of the voters right now on Twitter. 75% almost say that offensive line is the best position room, and then it's running back next, wide receiver, and then tight ends. So it's yeah.
That's a scary thing, Sean, a little bit, because when we start building something up, it usually crumbles by the time we get to the season. So, you know what? They all suck. Nobody's any good. We have no expectation this year. That's the way we need to go in.
All right, that's the company line I'll take. Offensive line is the worst position in the Big 12 conference for the Utes. All right, last thing. This is the actual last thing before I let you go. Yesterday, the American Football Coaches Association unanimously voted to eliminate the dual transfer portal windows and make it just one transfer portal window for 10 days in early January. I still think that you should do it after spring ball, and you should make a student athlete be on campus from, the fall semester all the way through finals in the spring semester. That's when spring football ends. And then they can jump into the portal. But nobody's listening to me. The coaches want it to be the beginning of the calendar year, early January, one transfer portal. Would this be an improvement?
Oh, it'd be, again, it's never going to be perfect. And some of those, the idea of having a limited window after spring football certainly wouldn't be a bad thing to have. Maybe it's a little mini open season type of thing. But I think having it later, that December time, you got coaches being fired that need to be hired, and it's not just head coaches, but it's also position coaches. Getting an offensive coordinator at Utah was a huge priority, and to be doing that while you're trying to get early signing and trying to deal with the transfer portal, December is just an insane time. So to kind of spread that out a little bit, you get new coaches hired, fired, you get through the early signing period, and then you have a significant amount of time now to really focus on the transfer portal, especially with everyone knowing it's going to be a bigger part of what's going on. I mean, Utah jumped into the transfer portal in a big way this year, and you're going to see that with teams pretty regularly moving forward. So it's got to have its own special window, and the old signing day in February is essentially dead. So it kind of maybe replaces or takes the place of that. But I love spreading it out. I'm not even really opposed to it just being once. It's kind of one of those things. So what it also does is it's like you got to be a little bit more judicious and selective about where you go and who you pick up because you're stuck with them. And so that may actually help a little bit calm things down in the transfer portal as well.
I'm lying to you a bunch today. There's one more question that has nothing to do with Utah football, but I don't get to talk to NFL veterans all that often. Would you have wanted somebody like Deion Sanders as a head coach?
I would. I'm a fan of coaches who really understand from where a player's coming from, but also are going to hold your feet to the fire. And with as much flash as Deion Sanders has, there's a lot of substance there. And he'd definitely be a guy that I wouldn't have any kind of problem playing for. And I like the confidence. I like, just a lot about, and you understand and kind of roll your eyes at the, Coach Prime and all the flash of everything. And when you see that there's a lot of substance there, but yeah. Now I've had good and bad experiences with former players. There's a former player that coached me that I was really excited that he was my coach, and it turned out to be a really bad situation. And so it's not always perfect, but you get the right coach, and Deion certainly seems like that guy. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. Personally, I'd just love to see Deion in Dallas just because it's the best reality TV going right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, I'd just pay for that. I'd pay his salary just to watch him, to watch the train wreck that happens in Dallas between him and Jerry Jones, especially if Shador's there.
Yeah, well, that's and I guess that's that's like a real condition for Deion. Everyone, I heard Robert Griffin III on the Dan Patrick Show talking about it this morning again. Like, he has said, I only want to do it if I can coach my sons. That, like, no NFL coach gets to dictate terms like that, but he's trying to.
Well, he says that until he gets a whole lot of money shoved in his face. That may change his mind.
Yeah, we'll see how it actually plays out. Scott, always great talking to you. Thanks for your time today.
You got it. Take care.
The Utah football legend, Scott Mitchell, part of the Big 12 at noon coverage. Again, mountainlandsupply.com. Go check it out. All right, I asked the question to Scott. I asked the question to you on the offensive side of the ball. Which position room is in the best shape with this updated spring football roster? We'll turn our focus to the defense. On the defensive side of the ball, where are the Utes strongest position-wise? We get to that in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, the poll question is up at Real OC Sports. You can weigh in at 877-353-0700 on our Dish Pros text line as well. What defensive position group is in the best situation based on the updated spring football roster for the University of Utah? 2025 roster is live at utahutes.com. So you can go to the grid setting, filter by position, and look at the O-line, the wide receivers. Right now, O-line running away with this question on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think there's anyone in this building who's going to argue with that. I don't think there's anyone in our small autonomous kingdom of ESPN 792.1 FM.
Yes, ours, because part of the week it's yours.
Yes. We're co-presidents. Not really. But on the defensive side of the ball, and now it's easy on the offense to say, all right, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, and offensive line. On the defense, I had to be a little bit selective because it's linebackers, corners, safeties. Of course, you can put corners and safeties together as defensive backs. And the same thing with D-line. You can go D-ends, D-linemen, like D-ends, D-tackles. So really, there's 6 position groups on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't want to – you can't do it. You can only have 4, okay? So I did linebackers, corners and safeties, and D-line. And I'll tell you why I did it that way after I read some of the names. So linebackers, Lander Barton, Levani Demooney, who got the medical red shirt because he missed all of last year, was an all-conference player in the Pac-12 for Stanford. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This guy is really bleeping good, okay? Jonnu Hall. You got another Anai on the rise. You got another Ellis on the rise playing linebacker. So Barton, Demooney, and Hall are going to be like your 3 linebacker core. The Andrews kid, who had a spot time last year. Big physical kid. We'll see if he can maintain flexibility and movement. He's a pretty muscle-bound guy at this point. We'll see. So linebacker. Corners, and this includes the nickels, but Snowden, Scooby Davis, Kenan Johnson, bunch of those guys, right? Safety, Rabbit Evans, Nate Ritchie, Teo Johnson, etc. D-line, Aliki Vimahi is back, again because of injury. Dallas Vakalahi was the freshman who was kind of pressed into service and actually accounted very, very well for himself as a true freshman, which at that position is so hard to do. Dallas Vakalahi is on this list for me. Jonah Lea'ea got a shout-out from Morgan Scally in his availability at the press conference yesterday. Morgan was like, we have been desperately trying to get this guy to put on weight, and it's finally happened. He's a real athlete playing D-line, D-end. He's kind of a tweener. We'll see which one he really kind of bites on.
He's an early candidate to post-football career being a skinny big guy. skinny
big
lineman guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's another Kaufusi, although I think this Kaufusi is like a more of a distant cousin to the like original Kaufusis, like the Bronson Kaufusi situation. I'm not exactly sure. Paul Fitzgerald, the Utah State transfer, Logan Fano, Cash Dillon, John Henry Daly. So all of those guys go on the D-line because I didn't want to separate defensive ends and D linemen because I think individually those groups don't necessarily hold up and really justify voting for them, period. But as a collective, you put it all together and it's like, okay, I would like more depth, more of a rotation, more of an established rotation in the interior D tackles. That would have been the case if Tanuvasa and Pepa stick around, but that's not the case now, unfortunately. And then same thing with the DNs, right? Not because of transfer, but you graduated guys. Van's gone. Connor O'Toole's gone. Those guys weren't able to stay healthy most of their careers anyway. So as a collective, I think the D-line could justify some votes. Right now they're getting 14% of the vote. That's good for third place. Safety is dead last. That's 12%. Corners, that's 20% of your vote right now. And I can't say I disagree with this one either, but that linebacker room, Lander Barton, especially if he plays like he did the last 4 games of the year, Levani Demooney, and the rising Jonnu Hall, that's a good linebacker room. And oftentimes at Utah football, the linebacker room has been strong almost as a byproduct of what the defensive line is. It actually confused the heck out of me for a lot of those early Pac-12 years why Utah did not have a better linebacker room, because your defensive line in the Mountain West years and going all the way back to like the Luther Ellis days, your D-line at Utah was always so nasty, so big, so strong, so good. Ma'ake Kemoyatu, like Steve Fafita, Sione Pua, all these dudes were just monsters. Star Lotulele. And it was weird to me that the best linebackers in the country weren't like, yeah, let me go play behind those guys, because then no one is blocking me. They're eating up all of the pressure, all of the attention from the offensive line, and that means I'm running free and making plays and creating havoc and making tackles. They eventually grew into that, right? You started to really have a nice pipeline of linebackers, and now instead of the linebackers being a byproduct success-wise of a dominant defensive line, that might be flipped this year. Your linebackers might be relatively better than your D-line. So we'll see what that means from an opponent blocking scheme perspective.
When they might, maybe it's instead of the D-line helping the linebackers shine, it's these linebackers helping plug some holes that might be there because the D-line isn't quite as strong.
Well, right, because now Dallas Vakalahi hasn't received enough attention, doesn't jump out on film the same way that like Lander Barton does. So now instead of the double team working to Lander Barton, they say, don't even bother with the chip on the double team, just get to Barton. And that means now Vakalahi doesn't have to take on a double team even for a second, and now maybe he makes more plays because of it. So you could see this dynamic flipped this year if all these guys can stay healthy. That is an excellent linebacker room. Barton, DeMooney, and Hall could all be all-conference players from a talent standpoint.
How often, going back to what we were talking about, the linebackers supporting the D-line, if you will, instead of the other way around, how often does successful teams have that kind of dynamic? It doesn't seem to be.
It's not usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Right?
I just wonder if that truly ends up holding true going into the season through fall camp. I wonder how successful the defense, the run defense in particular, can be in that with that kind of dynamic.
And the scheme at Utah sees downhill safeties get a lot of tackles because even linebacker responsibilities are geared towards either spilling the play or turning the play back inside. Like you have to take on blocks with a particular shoulder to leverage the ball carrier and the blocking a certain way. And that means safeties like Nate Ritchie can come downhill and Teo Johnson can come downhill and get a lot of tackles. And that's why oftentimes, even when Utah's got really good linebackers, you'll see a safety with like an equal number to, or even in strange years, a higher number of like total tackles than some of your linebackers who are more in the thick of it. That's a scheme thing at the University of Utah. And I think this safety group is geared toward that. Are they geared toward pass coverage? That's like when I look at Rabbit Evans and I look at Nate Ritchie and I look at Teo Johnson, I'm just like, yeah, those guys are play downhill, create some havoc in the backfield and in the run game type guys. Are they going to be excellent center fielders like a Marcus Williams? That's a different task. So somebody's got to figure that part of it out.
Feels like most likely of those three that could be that is Teo Johnson, right?
Yeah,
the fact that he started out as a corner.
Yes, I think he's got the most versatility in that regard. And I think it's actually a super pleasant surprise that someone with his build is such a, honey badger coming downhill.
Because he does last year he did still look like a corner out there.
He's
playing
not big.
Safety.
He's just not big.
But he lays the lumber, right?
Yeah,
he can really hit. He can really
like watching
deliver those hits.
Watching Marquise Blair.
Oh my gosh!
You're just like, okay, that dude's a box safety.
Cole Bishop looked like a linebacker playing safety
that makes
at times.
Sense.
Yeah,
those guys, Chase Hansen ended up becoming a linebacker, right? Those guys, it made perfect sense. Teo Johnson, you're just like, oh my gosh.
That's when you go. he's wiry strong.
Yes.
The guys that look skinny but can lay big hits, or like in the basketball, you guys who are skinny but can stay durable. Yeah, wiry strong.
And right now, okay, so Scooby Davis emerged again in relief of an injured Kenan Johnson before Cam Calhoun got healthy. Scooby Davis started getting a bunch of play, looked really, really good. Smith Snowden is going to be one of the best defensive backs in the conference next year. And Kenan Johnson, knock on wood, will hopefully get a full season being healthy after a devastating injury in the first game of the season. So your cornerback room is, I think, pretty solid. And Sharif Shaw is excellent at the minutia and the detail-oriented coaching that is required when you're playing defensive back against high-powered quarterbacks and high-powered offenses. And you're going to see some of that in the Big 12. So go to at Real OC Sports on Twitter, or X as we call it these days, and vote in the two polls. Which offensive position room is in the best situation for 2025? Which defensive position group is in the best situation for 2025? I'm going to do this question in I'm going to ask the question 3 more times in 2025. I'm going to ask it post spring football after we've seen and heard some of this. I'm going to do it heading into fall camp because there will be a couple of different names, and there'll be maybe a freshman or two that could be an impact player.
There's the May transfer window and too, then, so
yes.
there's chance that, like you said, new players because of incoming transfers for sure.
And then I'm going to do it the week of the first game because there will be some attrition either with transfer out or guys don't rise up the depth chart, or, knock on wood, heaven forbid, there will be an injury here or there that changes the way these rooms look. So I'm going to ask this question at least 3 more times. But as of January 15th, right now, linebacker is considered the strongest defensive position room. Offensive line is considered the strongest offensive position room. Don't have an argument against either. I've alluded to this a couple times on the show today. Yesterday, the American Football Coaches Association had a unanimous vote in favor of closing down the second transfer portal window, moving a single window to early January. Every coach who voted said, yes, I support this. When we come back in 3 minutes, I'm going to tell you why that vote does not matter at all, and nobody's going to get what they want here. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. You heard me talk about it a little bit yesterday. You've heard me talk about it a couple times today. Coaches Association, the American Football Coaches Association, met yesterday. A vote was cast, unanimous support for moving 2 transfer portal windows down to 1 and making it a 10-day period in early January. Coaches want this to be simpler. They want it to be more direct. They want it to be at the end of the football season prior to the spring semester. You can get guys enrolled and started in school and for the spring semester. I still think it'd be better after spring football. I still think it'd be better if you actually were on campus through an entire academic year, and then you can decide if you need to move on. A lot of things happen. A lot of changes happen. Although, look, the coaching carousel spins fastest in bowl season, so I can support where the coaches say, all right, you can hit the ground running with your new roster. The transfer portal window in January as a single entity would make more sense than what's going on right now. Despite this receiving unanimous support, it's going to be really, really hard to make it happen because of litigation. And I saw multiple voices speaking to this effect on ESPN, on Sports Illustrated, on CBS Sports. You can't ring a bell. You can't put a genie back into the bottle. Pandora's box stays open. However, whatever cliche you want to use here, as soon as you give somebody something, they start to expect that thing. And they don't want to go back to a more limited thing with anything. If your boss gives you a raise and then next year says, actually, I have to go back to your original pay, you don't like that. You've become used to the new thing that is more beneficial to you.
And it may end up happening, but you're going to put up a fight.
Exactly. That's right.
To make sure it doesn't happen if you can.
You're going to push back on it.
Yeah.
And in the case of these student athletes and their agents and anyone who has a vested interest in people being able to move around and do what they want, you can't unring the bell because they won't let you. They will sue you if you try to unring the bell. When you say, hey, no, we're going to do this one window only in January. And by the way, we're going to only 1 transfer now. None of this transferring your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year. Can't do it. Well, sorry, but you already let this happen, NCAA. You already let people have too much freedom. You already let the disorganized chaos reign. And so when the disorganized chaos is self-serving or when it serves one particular group in this conflict, that group is not going to let it go away. Even if 80% of the players are like, yeah, I'll be able to make a transfer portal decision in early January and only in early January, there's going to be 20% or there's going to be one vocal kid or there's going to be 10 people who want to fix it or who want it to be what they expect it now. So you can't fix it and go back to 1 because there will be lawsuits, and that sucks. Your chance to see a Run to Utes home game is now. Text Utes to 33986 to win a pair of tickets. They take on TCU tonight in Fort Worth. Pregame is right here at 5:30, 6 p.m. tip. Next home game Saturday against BYU. It is a red out. Tickets are at utahtickets.com or text Utes to 33986 to win a pair of tickets. Speaking of hoops, we'll talk a little women's basketball. Gianna Niepken's going to join us in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
51-48, Baylor by 3. Reese Ross moving to her left, backdoor cutter, Sneepkins, easy layup up and in as she burns Sarah Andrews to the basket.
Little Gianna Neepkins backdoor layup, 70-61 loss to Baylor last night. She had 17 points. That sound courtesy of the Utah Sports Radio Network. Tyson Ewing on the call. And the aforementioned Gianna Neepkins joins us now on the Sean O'Connell Show, the Utah women's basketball star, kind enough to call us. Gianna, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the season you guys are having so far. I know that it's not the result you wanted against Baylor. Turnover is the big problem there when you take a look at it in hindsight.
Yeah, I think kind of just didn't execute our stuff well, and it led to some turnovers, and they were able to capitalize on those turnovers. So something we got to fix for next game.
Look, there's plenty of basketball left to play, and you guys are having a very solid season so far. You yourself averaging about 17 points a game. What's been the key to improvements, both personally and as a squad this year in your mind?
Yeah, I think just focusing on playing basketball the way Utah wants to play, and that's moving the ball, making extra passes, competing harder than other teams. So that's just been our focus. And, we lost last game, but like you said, a lot of seasons left. So just focusing on the next one. But, yeah.
How has it been adjusting to the absence of Kennedy for these few games? She's out with an injury that thankfully is not going to be like season ending or anything like that, but it is an adjustment when you lose a player of that quality.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we want Kennedy back, and we're just super grateful that she'll be able to be back this season. But Kennedy plays a huge role for us, and that's not just how she shoots the ball. She competes hard for us. So I think filling that role, no one person can replace Kennedy. It's got to be a little bit more from everyone else. So we've been trying to do that, but we can't wait to get her back.
What's the biggest difference between Gavin Peterson and Coach Rob? They obviously knew each other and have a lot of the same philosophies and do things, I think, mostly – I don't play for either of them, never did, but it seems like there'd be more similarities than differences. But what are the differences between your new head coach and the one that left for the Sparks job?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gavin and just the whole University of Utah has done a great job of trying to make that transition smooth. And honestly, he still tries to do a lot of similar things that Coach Rob does, because when your head coach leaves mid-season, there's not a lot of time for a change to happen just because you didn't have that whole preseason to work on new things. So, I mean, I'd just say his style is a little different, but that's just because no matter any time you get a new coach, their style and personality is a little bit different. So just dynamic is different, but that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. So just working with that. But like I said, it's been super smooth, and it's been a lot of fun to have him as a head coach. So.
Gianna Neepkins, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell, Utah women's basketball star. So speaking of changes, changing from a Pac-12 conference that is the deepest conference in college women's basketball every year to the Big 12, it's a cliche thing. We're like, it's different conference, it's a different style of basketball. How different is it out there on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that you'll see is just it's a little more physical. Pac-12 was a great conference. Big 12 is a great conference. It's just I feel like some teams just give a little different look physicality-wise. But we're figuring it out, and like we don't know a lot of teams. They all don't know us. So just trying to figuring that out, understanding scouts, and locking in on that a little bit more, because it's not like you've been playing against the Washingtons for 4 years and know exactly what they're doing. So just focusing on scout and doing the little things right.
Does one style or the other suit your game better, do you find?
No, I think as a basketball player, especially when you have opportunities to play in March Madness, you have to be able to play and go against anybody in the country. So I think now in the Big 12, you have some old Pac-12 schools, so you get a little mix of both, and that's been good for us. And so we're still learning and figuring it out, but a lot of season left, and we're looking forward to it.
one of the big things that a lot of us in sports media talked about when the conference realignment thing was happening again, and you saw, Utah joining the Big 12 and Cal and Stanford joining the ACC. We were like, well, what about the travel? It's going to be a lot different. How different is it for you? Because, the Pac-12 footprint, I think, is a little smaller. Schools generally were a little bit closer. But has it changed the rhythm, the routine in a meaningful way for you all as players?
I think the biggest change is that since there was teams that were close, you could usually just go to 2 schools in a weekend. We could play the LA schools in a weekend. We could play the Washington schools in a weekend now. It's a little more spread out. So we'll have games on Tuesdays and Sundays or Wednesdays, which it's just the rhythm of it's a little different. But that's just something we're figuring out. And isn't too crazy. We have staff and people that are there to help make it a little bit easier. So.
Well, the schedule's not going to get easier anytime soon, at least not in the immediate future. You got a tough test against a highly ranked TCU team coming in just a couple of days. That's another road game for you all. What are you seeing? What's the scout on TCU?
Yeah, TCU is a great team. They can shoot the ball. They have a great inside presence. So just like I said, we got to get back to playing Utah basketball, moving the ball, because at the end of the day, they have to guard us too. But locking in, knowing personnel, and then, I think we can compete with anybody in the country. So just having that confidence too.
What's the school schedule like right now? How many credits you taking? Are you on I only have class on Tuesdays and Thursdays kind of thing? How much are you able to manipulate it right now?
So I'm a senior in school, so that means I was kind of winding down my schedule. So I'm just in 3 classes right now. Only 1 in-person class, so luckily it hasn't been too bad, but still figuring that out too with all the travel.
Okay, so the 1 in-person class, is it when you only have the 1 in-person class, is it harder to get up and be motivated to go to the 1 in-person class? Like when you have a full slate and you're already on campus and you're walking around and you already got to be there, of course you're going to the next class. Is it harder when that's the only one you got to do?
It's not too hard because attendance is mandatory, and I know how important school is, so I stay locked in a little bit.
Okay, that's coaches listening, and you gave the perfect answer right there. I can appreciate that. All right, well, good luck. We appreciate you giving us some time today. Good luck against TCU. Keep up all the great work, and we'll see you out at some games, all right?
Thank you so much.
Gianna Neepkins, Utah's best basketball player in this 2024-2025 season, kind enough to give us a few minutes. The senior in school, junior eligibility-wise, 6-footer out of Duluth, Minnesota, and averaging, as we talked about, almost 17 points a game. She scored 17 last night against Baylor on the road. And look, these are games you want to see the team win. They lost against Kansas State at home. That was kind of an ugly performance. Last night, they shot the ball well. They just turned the ball over too much. You can't give Baylor so many free opportunities. They're a good enough team that they're going to take advantage of those. And you're going to have to be a lot cleaner with your possession and your ball control against a team like TCU, who, as I already said, was ranked number 10 in the country and is a good little litmus test for where Utah stands in Big 12 basketball right now. But not 100%, not full strength from an injury standpoint. Kennedy McQueen still out. Gianna Neepkins carrying a pretty big load while one of her most talented teammates is out. But Gavin Peterson and that crew, they're figuring it out, James.
Yeah, and Gianna's really good. If you haven't had a chance to see her play, it's a treat to watch her play, whether it's in person or you're on ESPN Plus or ESPN2, ESPN when they're on TV. She's a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, there's players from bigger programs, Haley Van Lith, for example, that she's going to go head-to-head with on Friday that are getting a lot more shine than she is nationally. But she can go toe-to-toe with the Van Lith, and I'm excited to see her go up against a player that a lot of people think is the best player in the nation and be able to show against the number 10 team in the nation, too, on the road, and be able to show, hey, I can go toe-to-toe the same way Alyssa Peely did last year against South Carolina in Connecticut in that Connecticut early preseason tournament that they had on ESPN. She really got a ton of new Utah fans, got a ton of new fans for her, got great exposure for her by what she dropped, like almost 40 points against a really good South Carolina team last year. This is an opportunity for Gianna to do the same thing, and I expect her to. She's got the full package. She can shoot it from outside. She can drive past people. You heard the highlight, the way Tyson described it, her blowing past a player on a cut for a layup. She's a really good player, which is why I don't think that they're concerned losing a leader like Kennedy McQueen for a short amount of time. But I don't think that the team's overly concerned because they've still got a lot of talent, namely their best player, Gianna Neepkins, being able to hold it down for the next little bit.
Yeah, look, they've got like Maya Torres, a really high quality player.
She's been great as a transfer this year for sure.
Neepkins is very reliable and consistent. This is a team that, when at full strength, is going to be able to compete with anybody. There's a really interesting dynamic that maybe I should have explored with Gianna, but we kept her through the break and probably too much of her time with that conversation. But we spend so much energy and time on the show talking about NIL and its effect on college football and even its effect on men's basketball. And in the women's basketball world, the NIL thing has taken on a different sort of life and is actually, I think, what NIL was intended to be in the first place. And this is true somewhat in gymnastics as well, and you'll see it with a little bit of volleyball and some, very sparingly in soccer and things like that. So Utah goes to play TCU. You mentioned Haley Van Lith, who was a part of Kim Mulkey's squad and was like a big star down there and transferred to TCU. And I really don't know. I truly don't know how much NIL was involved in the motivation there. I don't know what kind of fund the TCU women's basketball would be able to put together to entice someone like Haley Van Lith to come there, if that's what it was really all about for her. But there's a little bit of a departure from the football model, where with women's basketball and with gymnastics and some of these other things, like, corporations are handling the responsibility. Actual small businesses, local businesses are the ones, rather than just the collective is like, oh my gosh, I got to make sure that I funnel this money into this player in order to keep her happy. Like, a lot of the women's athletes are doing a much, much better job of cultivating a social media presence that translates into money for them. Haley Van Lith has 1.2 million followers on Instagram. I don't know how many she's got on TikTok. I don't know how many she's got on Blue Sky and Twitter and everything else. But I do know 1.2 million followers, and you presume because she does have a certain amount of notoriety with her competitive abilities and some of the stuff, like she got a little fiery with a couple players and rivalries that have developed there, that, you would presume that those 1.2 million, those are actual organic followers, and it's not just a bunch of bots that were purchased or whatever. But, James, if you have 1.2 million followers on any social media platform, you can monetize that.
Yeah, brands will reach out to you. We've seen that. I mean, that's why YouTubers is a job, for example, and TikTokers, that's an industry because of exactly that. Because people have been able to cultivate online social media, internet followings, and brands have taken notice and said, we want to put ads in your videos. We want you to talk about our product in our video. That is true NIL. What's come about in football, in particular men's basketball too, in a lot of ways, is pay for play under the guise of NIL. It's companies and donors saying, I'm going to pay you this much, and we're going to say it's my company paying you this much. What's happening in women's sports, basketball and gymnastics too, is they're looking at how many followers they have on social media, and they're saying, you know what, we want you to talk about our product.
And honestly, it's something that the men's revenue sports, for the most part, are not tapping into the same way.
No.
And we're all guilty of this. Social media is an unlimited potential platform. You know who Mr. Beast is? Are you familiar with this Mr. Beast guy?
Heard of him. I don't know him too much. I'm not that familiar with him, but I have heard of him.
Okay, so Mr. Beast, again, people have known about this dude for a decade.
Yeah.
Mr. Beast is the most followed creator on social media. He has 500 million followers across social media platforms, 340 million subscribers on his YouTube page, his YouTube channel, whatever you call that. The dude does – I've started to see more of his content. I guess the algorithm has decided, like, oh, you're going to like this Mr. Beast stuff, and they're correct. I love it.
Everyone else likes him, so you will probably like him too.
He does wild stuff where he'll be like, okay, I'm going to drop 2 people in the middle of the wilderness, and every day that they stay out there and survive in the wilderness, they get $10,000. Like, he creates just continuous videos of this. And he had a guy who lived like in a grocery store. Like he bought like a fully stocked Smith's and then he was just like, okay, it's closed and I'm just going to put cameras in there and this guy's going to live in it and I'm going to give him $10,000 for every day that he stays in there or whatever. So he does stuff like that. And it's just hatched presumably from the brain of him and his creative team and everything like that.
At this point, he's probably got a team. He probably started out just by himself, but he's got a team now. Yeah.
But it's just like, it appeals to whatever that little lizard brain is in your head. Like, well, how long could I survive out here in the woods?
How do I get him to ask me to do that?
And here's the thing. Like, I don't know if you have to apply for it, but he was an early adopter and he just created this. He's a billionaire because of social media. And that this Livy Dunn, who is
the gymnast,
the LSU gymnast, I think she's the #1 NIL earner in all of college sports, not because she's the best performer in college sports, but because she has such a huge social media presence. And now she's, in a relationship with that Paul Skeens, and like they're like this super power couple. And of course, there's all these endorsements that come with that. And like, I'm going to stay away from the conversation about how much of this stuff is associated with your physical attractiveness, because that's an unfair thing with Mr. Beast or with Livy Dunn or whatever. But like the social media aspect is this unlimited potential platform that a lot of female athletes have tapped into in a way that a lot of male athletes have yet to do. And that's at the college level, certainly at the pro level. I mean, there's high school kids doing it now. And it's a fascinating thing. And it's not just athletes. All of us have unlimited earning potential if we're creative enough on social media. I am not. I have not been able to monetize social media despite, the early days of sports media.
You have your tips enabled on Twitter?
Dude, I don't.
No one's giving you any tips for your tweets.
No one's buying my feet pics on other platforms. Like, it's just the thing is, like,
I've had the same struggle. Like I've had for me, it's always been just getting followers, like tweeting enough, posting enough to get followers. And like, I just don't want to live on here, right?
It's so funny when I took this job, right? When Bill moved on to his job at the University of Utah and ESPN 700 was kind enough to call me and be like, hey, can you do this? I was like, yes. And this is my 5th different radio gig. And I was like, you know what I have not done before that I'm going to do and I'm going to get better at? I'm going to post like updates every single day. I resolved to do it every single day, James. I made it 4 days. And I was like, I look stupid on here. I'm sick of like filming myself saying, hey, coming up on the show. But people who are disciplined in that regard have found ways to really change the game for themselves. And the reason I bring this up on the sports media show, on a sports talk radio show, the home of the Utes, is like the efforts, the social media presence for Utah football, excellent. They do a great job of creating, the little videos, the little tiny microphone, like, hey, when guys are walking in and out of practice, what's the best flavor of Pop-Tart, that kind of stuff. And we all watch it. We're just like, oh, this is great. Let me see this.
Favorite Avenger.
Yeah, this snackable content. Let's see what this is. And that is all monetizable for collective, for fundraising, for NIL, for a player who wants to be the guy or the gal who's like, you know what, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm not going to worry about, or I'm going to worry less about how much I'm guaranteed from the Garfs or whoever else, because I now am creating this. And there's a balance that coaches have to be able to find. Like, I don't know what it's like for Livy Dunn or anyone on that level when they're like setting up their lights and their camera and their everything, like at practice. Can you imagine? I mean, I can't imagine running out to practice and I've got a camera crew following me for my social media presence, or I'm setting up like the ring light to go around my phone to film a selfie video, and Ron McBride wandering into the shot in the back and just be like, what the hell are you doing? Turn that off. You know what I mean? Like,
it's practice.
There's a whole different world, and Utah's going up against one of these athletes. She's not the top, but like Haley Van Lith has endorsements, has a huge presence. I would be talking mad noise if I was playing against somebody. I would go to her Instagram account and I'd be like, that little purse that you were advertising is stupid. That thing sucks.
I hate your Adidas commercials.
Yeah, your Adidas commercial is lame.
Even though those, I don't know if you've noticed her Adidas commercials playing pickup. Those are kind of cool. But I would be like, I hate them.
Adidas are soccer shoes. Get out of my face.
You know what the S stands for in Adidas, right? It's soccer. You don't deserve to play on this court.
All day I dream about basketball.
Basketball.
Anyway, just big thanks to Gianna Neepkins for joining us because of the Haley Van Lith matchup. That struck me as something that, like, man, you don't see it all the time where, like, BYU, where Utah State, Weber State, where they're going up against one of these, like, mini celebrities in the online world. The social media world is like not real life. We all acknowledge that it's not real life, but we all spend time on it probably every single day. So it is real life, and it is real money for these people.
It's a real following too. Like, people know, like, there's a reason why they get the real money. The people know who these people are because of that fake online world.
All right, got to take a break. We're going to come back. I've got a couple more takeaways from the press conference yesterday. It's 24-plus hours old. Some comments from Morgan Scalley, comments from Kyle Whittingham, and from Jason Beck about what we should expect with Utah football as the 2025 cycle begins. And you need big improvement. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM Cash Kickoff is here. Shoot your shot now to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. Text TRIP, T-R-I-P, to 508-777-1000. That's 508-777-1000. Text the word TRIP, T-R-I-P, to 508-777-1000 for your chance to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. This is a nationwide contest on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. You're listening to the Sean O'Connell Show. Starting to wind things down, Spence Checketts will be up next 27 minutes from now on The Drive. We always look forward to that. In 15 minutes, I'm going to give away 2 tickets to the PBR. Professional bull riding is coming to the Delta Center February 7th and 8th. James, am I eligible to win those? Can I get my own PBR tickets if I answer my own question correctly?
You could try. We'll see if Shea and Promotions lets you sneak one through that way.
My name is John O'Donnell.
John O'Donnell. Yes, John O'Donnell.
Never mind that it's the same phone number that Sean O'Connell has.
That sounds familiar for some reason, that name, John.
I want to get into some more of the stuff that we took away from the surprise. I won't call it a surprise. It wasn't a surprise. By the off-schedule Utah football press conference with Jason Beck and Morgan Scally and Kyle Whittingham. But a little order of business here. Haloti Ngata, local high school football legend, star Oregon Duck, and then, of course, long-standing dominant force in the NFL, is being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2025. So the pride of Highland High School ending up in the College Football Hall of Fame. Kind of cool.
Really cool.
We graduated the same year, James. Haloti got significantly more attention on the recruiting front than I did, if you're surprised by that.
I'm a little surprised. You're telling me that 2 Utah high school football legends graduated the same year? Wow.
Look, Haloti is probably still, I haven't seen him in a while, just a force of nature.
So do you remember, did you play against him then?
We didn't play. He was at Highland. Highland back then was a 4A school.
Oh, okay.
Jordan back then was a 5A school, but he was a guy that I think we had a common opponent that year, and seeing him on film and then seeing like at the All-State banquet type stuff, like the highlights of Haloti Ngata, and I think you could probably find it on YouTube. I promise you he didn't have to try most of the time, and he was dominating people just like a freak. And there's rugby highlights of him, people trying to tackle that guy as he's running down the pitch. Team USA Rugby wanted him. Team Tonga Rugby wanted him. Like, he is a unique one-of-one type athlete, certainly in that class and beyond. I mean, I think he's going to end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a nose guard. It's not easy, but you can build a pretty strong case that he belongs there.
He and Jeff Schwartz overlap at Oregon, or was Jeff a little after him?
They overlapped.
Okay.
Yes.
So Jeff knows him
pretty
well.
The look, offensive and defensive linemen, I don't know how much they fraternize, but yeah, I think Haloti's junior year would have been Jeff's freshman year.
Okay.
Up at Oregon, if I've got my math right on that one. But yeah, so congratulations to Haloti, who by all accounts is, I don't know him well, but by all accounts is even better as a human than he was as a football player, and that's something you love to hear. So that's a big deal for a local high school product to be in the National College Football Hall of Fame and potentially, eventually, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm guilty of this, certainly. I think that we forget guys who grew up in the state but didn't forget that they're part of our state because they went to a different college sometimes. And sometimes we erroneously associate a guy because he did go to a Utah college. He's a
like
Utah native. But
like a born and raised.
Sometimes we do that because we hold our BYU, our Cougars, our Utes, our Aggies to such high of a regard. But like, it's important that we remember guys who actually grew up here, even if they didn't choose one of our favorite schools here. And when they're getting recognized, it's important that we recognize them as Utahns, great Utah athletes, even if they're not great Utah Utes athletes like Haloti Ngata.
And look, he's still a Utahn. He lives here. Like he came back. He's a Utah guy. So Haloti, great success story, and being honored on that front. That's really cool. Even though he did it in an Oregon uniform. His recruitment, by the way, if you go back, he was a guy who committed to BYU, flipped a couple of times, and ended up at the University of Oregon. And this was, it's hard to really explain for people, like if you're younger than a certain age, how off the map Utah high school football recruits were. Yeah. Even back in the class of 2002, which is when Haloti Ngata graduated. Like, yes, there were guys going D1, but those guys were going to Utah, BYU, and Utah State.
Maybe a California school.
There were a couple of guys who got like a Pacific Northwest or a California school. There was certainly some attention from like the Big Sky and those types of places. You could end up at like Montana State. And obviously this is not a universal thing, but people have gotten so accustomed to multiple players from the state of Utah going to SEC schools, going to Big Ten schools, going to USC, to Oregon, to Texas. Like, this is a totally different environment than Haloti. He had to overperform and be like discovered in a way that Utah athletes no longer have to struggle through. Now, I mean, Dan Lanning, do people know this? Dan Lanning was in town last week. He was at Bingham High School visiting commits last week. Dan Lanning, the number one recruiter in the country, flew the Phil Knight private jet into Airport 2 and was hanging out in South Jordan, Utah. My buddy is the head coach down there and started posting a bunch of pictures with these massive Polynesian kids and him and their mom. And, oh, look, there's Dan Lanning. Oh, that's why he's posting these pictures. My high school coach buddy is like, look what we got here. We are producing the Haloti went to Oregon. There was a kid named Terrell Richards who was a Hunter High School product who went to Oregon and ended up transferring back to Utah State. He bounced back. Like, that, nobody was going those places back then. Nobody. Utah and BYU had a fence built around the elite talent here. That same year, you had Brian Keel was a product of that class. Johnny Harleen was a product of that class. Those guys are local legends. Everyone knows where they went to high school. Everyone knows. Haloti went to the NFL and had a potential Hall of Fame career after going to Oregon and dominating up there from little old Highland High School in what at the time was it was like a backwater from a high school recruiting standpoint.
Yeah. And I think it needs to be said that a lot of the national attention is due to Utah joining the Pac-12. Like, it is. Utah joining the Pac-12, Dr. Chris Hill and others that were instrumental in making that happen. That has been such a game changer for college football in this state. The Jazz were still everyone's number one product in the state, whether it's college or pro sports, and now it feels like it's no doubt college football. I don't know if that happens if Utah isn't the first school to go to a Power 4, Power 5 conference, and then opens the door for BYU to follow, about a decade later. Like that's the thing that when we talk about the national attention that these high school recruits are getting now, that doesn't happen if Utah never joins the Pac-12. If Utah is still a Group of 5 school, and BYU too.
I'm going to see if I can reach out to some folks and see if we can get Haloti on the show at some point this week or next week.
That'd be great.
To talk about being in the College Football Hall of Fame and look back. I mean, I very distinctly remember there was a feature in, I guess it would have been the Salt Lake Tribune sports section. Again, these are print. This is not internet, right? Where it was like talking about how he had offers from like 100 schools or something like that and how insane that was, how crazy that was for a Utah high school recruit. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the picture was him like laying in a pile of envelopes or sitting there with a bunch of envelopes around him or something like that. And, of course, the story is the classic one of how he's just like a regular kid who happens to be the most sought-after recruit in the Western United States. I wonder if anyone has a copy of that. If you do, 877-353-0700.
You got to hang that up find a copy of that, hang that up in the studio here.
If anyone in the Ngata or Moala family that the Haloti's people, if you have like a copy of that we can laminate and hang up here, that'd be cool. Because that was a moment. And you say like Utah being on the map is a product of Utah joining the Pac-12 conference. Absolutely true. Utah high school talent being recruited to where Corner Canyon has like 11 dudes on D1 scholarships every year. Bingham has like half a dozen guys on D1 scholarships, and Sky Ridge and Lehigh and Brighton and all these powers, and even places like Kearns. I mean, these schools all owe, like, at least on some level, a little bit of a thank you. These families who don't have to pay for an education for their children owe at least a little bit of a thank you to, well, it goes further back than Haloti, but to guys who were like paving the way, because you don't get the attention. There are still places in the country where the private jet never lands to recruit the kids.
There places in SEC footprint.
There are still places where they don't do that, because even if they did go get a kid from there, he was the only one who was good enough. Or if they went and got a kid from there, he turned out to not be so great, and so they stopped going there or whatever. And that has not been the case. You know, some of these guys that matriculated from a Utah high school to First Utah and BYU and schools like that, and then it started to break out, and then what was a best-kept secret for a long time is now everybody does it. You know, Lavelle Edwards and Ron McBride were some of the first guys recruiting West Valley City, and they were some of the first guys recruiting Kahuku. And now everybody does it. And now there's a Polynesian staff member and a Polynesian player on every single college football team and on every single NFL team. It's wild. Anyway, congratulations to Haloti. I spent a lot more time on that than I thought I would. We'll take another break. We'll come back. Spence Checketts will join us at some point for a little bit of crosstalk. I'm going to give away 2 tickets to Professional Bull Riders. This is the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show wrapping up here on ESPN 792.1 FM. 2 tickets to PBR bull riding at the Delta Center, February 7th and 8th. If you could answer a question, I've given you the answer to this so many times over the last 2 days. It's embarrassing if you get this one wrong. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Devin Dampier, projected starter for Utah football in the 2025 season, was sacked how many times in 2024? As the starter in 12 games at New Mexico, how many times was Devin Dampier sacked? I talked about it yesterday. I talked about it again today. I asked Scott Mitchell about it again today. 877-353-0700, 2 PBR tickets if you're the first person with the correct answer on that one. James is having to start some things off on our sister station, and that means Porter, who, of course, produces the Drive with Spence Checketts, is in the booth now on the other side of the glass. PBR, you're a man of the animal husbandry. You're a rodeo type guy. Are you a fan of PBR?
I am. I'm a fan of bull riding, I should say. The PBR. You're involved in the fight world, so you understand there's dynamics between UFC and PFL, all that. Yes. PBR is obviously the main like bull riding specific thing. But it sometimes falls short as far as like getting the best bull riders out there.
Okay.
Because it's a rodeo circuit. So PRCA, they're all going for the national finals, they're all going for that. But the PBR does have some events where they're like doing a more I want to say primetime TV thing.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily like the creme de la creme all the time of bull riding.
I have been to PBR events in the past, and let me tell you, it's kind of like, at the very least, it's like a monster truck rally. It's a demolition derby. It's one of those things where it's just like, I got to go to this and see it a time or two. So if you don't win the tickets, go grab some tickets at the Delta Center February 7th or 8th, and just check that box in your sports viewing sort of pantheon. You mentioned the PFL. I'm glad you did. They just announced today, I've been privy to this information but not able to release it as of yet, a format change for Professional Fighters League this year. Instead of doing the regular season with the points and all that, they're going to single elimination Grand Prix style tournament.
Okay.
A strategic change that is kind of what the fighters were asking for. People were getting really bothered by you had to fight 4 times in 6 months and try to stay healthy through all that. And you got points for finishes and some guys would just get kind of, they'd land a lucky punch and they get the 6-point finish and maybe have an advantage over dudes who actually perform better. So fighters in camps asked for this. PFL was like, fine, we can do it that way. And, as a startup, you can be nimble and make some changes. And that's how it's going to be. Single elimination tournament. So 3 fights instead of, I had to do 5 in 7 months. Now they got 3 fights in 6 months. And instead of giving $1 million for that, they're doing $500,000 for that, which a per fight purse, like if you break it down, it actually works out to be about the same amount of money. If you win the $500,000 bonus plus your win and show money for each of the PFL fights, each of those 3 PFL fights, you're probably going to make the same per fight.
I also saw, Sean, you can probably expand on this. The Bellator PFL merge became official yesterday-ish?
Yeah, well, it
with
was
the
already,
rosters at least?
Yeah, it was kind of like there were obligations that had to be carried out. Bellator sold to the PFL prior to, like this time last year. They completed the sale, but there were obligations, television obligations, event obligations that were already under the Bellator banner. So PFL, we had to carry those out last year. I got to announce several of those fights. And then the Bellator brand is now folded, is now gone. It's like Pride was back in the day. It's like Elite XC, Strike Force, Affliction. There's been all these big name promotions. Bellator was the longest lasting of all those.
2008 to now, I think?
Yeah, I mean, it was around for a while, and it was at one point owned by Viacom, so there was some big money behind it, but sold to the PFL, so now all Bellator fighters are PFL fighters, or some of them didn't like the way things were going, demanded their release, and the PFL said, see you later.
Cool.
Go test the waters elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure that probably means plenty of fighters that are being absorbed and several that are cut, if you will.
Correct. So it's been interesting to see the changes that are going to be made. I get to call fights actually next week. This time next week, I will be on my way en route to Dubai to call the first fights of the year. So looking forward to that. The correct answer to the trivia question, good for 2 PBR bull riding tickets, as I've said many, many times. 4 times in 12 games, Devin Dampier was sacked at New Mexico last year. 4 times in 12 games. Wow. All right. Spence Checketts is here. The drive is next. Spence, how are you?
The mic is on? What's going on? 4 sacks. That's not a lot of sacks.
It's none. It's nothing.
Ready for the Spence random question of the day today?
I love the Spence random question of the day.
You ever hit an animal with your car?
No.
You have never done that?
I've never hit an well, maybe
not intentionally, but like a squirrel?
Obviously. I might have accidentally run over a bird or something. I'm not sure. Nothing that was impactful enough for me to be like, I remember this traumatic experience.
That nearly happened to me on the way in.
What kind of animal?
A dog.
Oh no! And you're a dog guy.
I'm a huge dog guy, and I was able to. But I mean, it was like slam the brakes. Poor woman comes running across the street to get her dog, who just probably saw a squirrel, as dogs do, and just bounced in the middle of the street. But it shook me because it was really close. Everything in my car just came forward, and it did. I did have a situation when I was 17 years old where a deer actually ran into my car as I was driving. I'm driving up the street, and I grew up in this wooded area in Connecticut. You can't see anything. The roads it's not a grid system. It's hard to get around. And it was at night, and suddenly I just hear this boom, my side mirror torn off. And it was a big deer, it was a buck. It had antlers and everything. Ran to the side of my car and then limped off into the woods and probably died. That was the only other time I've hit an animal with my car. But I nearly hit a dog, and it's I'm
glad you didn't.
Oh my gosh, man! And it was wouldn't have been awesome if it was a stray, but it was clearly a pet. And this poor lady was putting her hands up, and I just, whew.
Well. Good on you for driving aware and not looking at your phone or any of the other things that can happen.
Porter, there's no way Porter had, where Porter grew up, he probably often hit animals with his car.
Porter ran over a bunch of
animals. See, I knew it.
I don't want to do this.
Yep, probably still does on the reg. I knew it.
Listen, not intentionally. Let's be very clear.
Well, if it was intentional, we'd be having a different conversation.
But yes, I grew up where there are more deer and elk than there are people.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 or 3 times I've hit a deer, I've hit an elk, and one time I was not driving, my mother was. We hit and killed a neighbor and friend dog.
Oh, thank you for saying dog.
Dog.
I was waiting.
It was a canine.
A neighbor and friend.
Just a neighbor, a friend of the family.
Carla wasn't moving fast enough.
It was a canine, but it was a friendly canine, and I knew the dog, and it was actually very sad.
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Let's bring it back into my area of
a neighbor
here.
and friend. Pause. Damn it! Please say dog. A dog. Okay.
My mom ran over a neighbor and friend.
A dog.
Dog.
It was a tease. Okay.
Well done.
When you hit a deer or an elk and that proves to be fatal, and you're in a more rural setting to the animal,
you're expanding on this.
Is it poaching if you eat it?
No. So you do reach out to the Division of
right.
Let's PSA here. If you hit an animal while you're out there in the open spaces, you call. Of course, you report it, and then they actually come and harvest the meat if it's done in time and donate it. It goes to charity.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a real thing that happens.
Cool.
But if the deer hits you, right? Because the deer hit me.
Then can the deer eat you? Yes.
Or do you go to court and you have to, I'll speak against the deer hit me.
Yeah, you can get litigious, I'm sure. I know you got good lawyers, Spence.
No, I apologize for bringing this up. I'm a little shook, man, because it was too close. Devin Dampier only sacked 4 times. That's not a lot of sacks.
4 times. It's great.
That's not a lot of sacks. I went to the hockey game last night.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was fun. Now,
speaking of getting hit by cars, Montreal Canadiens lost a player to a crosswalk in Salt Lake City.
That's right. I did see that headline. And I'll tell you what, man, every time, and I was lucky enough to have some good seats, so you're down there. Those dudes are amazing athletes. Just incredible what they do on skates, how fast it is, and then the precision to not get caught off sides or the timing and the precision. Man, it really is such a fun spectator sport.
I have made this assertion, and nobody likes it. I used to do it all the time when I was on air with Jeff Schwartz because he especially would get mad. The most impressive, well-rounded athletes of all pro sports are team sports, certainly, are hockey players.
It's hard to argue with that, really.
Because you have to have all the things that we consider to be, like, athletic. You got to be strong. You got to be fast. You got to have great balance. You have to have incredible hand-eye coordination. You have to have great reflexes. And you got to be able to do it moving backwards and forwards.
Yes.
So it's very, very impressive. I think that would be a more widely held opinion if hockey were a more popular sport in the United States. If people grew up playing hockey and realized the demands of hockey, I think people would realize, like, yes, football players are amazing because they're so big and so strong and so fast, and they're like mutants. They're aliens, and so is Victor Wembanyama and people that are built like that.
LeBron, yeah.
But, like, when you talk about a 6-foot-tall, 180-pound guy who can do it all, that's hockey.
And ultimately, the reason why it's not a more popular sport in our country is it's not a great television sport. It just isn't. It's an incredible spectator sport. And they've tried everything over the years with hockey, like following the puck with like a flash.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're like, because really when you watch it on television, it's difficult to see the puck. But I think they've just kind of leaned to, it's a little bit like soccer. Like, yep, sorry, offside sucks. It's boring. The goals probably should be bigger. And I know everybody hates it, but our sport is what it is. And I think hockey has kind of come up with a similar approach. But, you know, the Rangers are in town coming up tomorrow. So the New York Rangers.
The team of your childhood.
The team of my childhood. I probably will not be able to make it, but it was fun to be there last night. And, you know, the Montreal Canadiens are like the original NHL dynasty with like Rocket Richard back in the day. So I'm sitting there watching the game. I'm like, I kind of pinching myself. I can't believe I'm watching the Montreal Canadiens play hockey in Salt Lake. So I know the club continues to struggle a little bit. I think they got Marino back last night. Going to be an up and down season, but it's a fun spectator experience. If you haven't been down there, man, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, it really is great, and they do a good job with the production. And again, this is not a purpose-built hockey arena that apparently is coming to Salt Lake City, so all good.
One more quick story that I got a kick out of. So I was there with a friend of mine, and he had to go to the ticket office because he was trying to help his niece and her boyfriend get in. So I was kind of standing on the concourse waiting for him. And, you know, you walk in, TSA, you know, all the things, make sure you're not carrying anything in you shouldn't. And two TSA members walked by me with a big old bin full of, like, half-dranken, like, Fireball bottles and, like, vodka bottles. And all these hockey fans were trying to get in. There was probably 20. You know, they're drinking as they get in, throw it in the back pocket. There's probably 20 half-drank booze bottles in this bin, and you don't see that at Jazz games very much.
I'll tell you what, that is the most significant difference in the early goings between Jazz fans and Utah Hockey Club fans is the alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
The opening night of Utah Hockey Club's existence sold more beer than any other event ever had at the Delta Center.
And they've had the Olympics and the NBA Finals. That may have been my favorite stat. Yeah, and I have to say the security of the Delta Center has improved quite a bit because I can remember after 9/11, never forget, everywhere, the security was like through the roof. And I was living back east at the time, and I came out here like 6 or 7 months after 9/11 and went to a Jazz game. And we're walking in, and the security guard's like, "You guys got a gun?" And I'm like, "Nope." He's like, "Oh, you're good." I'm like, That's it? That's the whole thing?
The honor system?
That's it.
We're going on the honor system?
Everywhere in America is like batting down the hatches. And in Salt Lake, like, "Hey, you carrying?" "Nope." "All right, you're good." I'm walking around the whole game. I'm like, I don't feel safe in here at all.
It's like that old myth that they was circling around when I was in college that, like, hey, if you think someone's a cop, you just ask them if they're a cop, and they have to tell you that they're a cop.
No, they don't.
If you think an undercover cop's trying to get you. And I'd just be like, that is definitely not true. What are you talking about? No, they have to say that they're a cop. Everyone thought that was like the hack, that you could get away with whatever you wanted.
And it definitely was not.
No, undercover cops lie all the time.
Yes,
That's what they
do.
Anyway.
Random non sequitur rant here, 10 minutes. You know, you never know where we're going to go during Crosstalk.
It's perfect. Crosstalk brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products. Locally made, locally serviced, locally warranted, locally installed. The mayor of Sac Lake City, Nate Orchard, in charge of that company now. Give him a call at 801-850-9100. Take advantage of the year beginning discounts, $2,500 off 10 windows or more. Tell them that OC sent you, even though technically we're in drive time now.
I'm a team player. It's all good.
Stay tuned for Spence Checketts. That's it for the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.